Alrighty, alrighty, alrighty. I believe, according to the boys and the girls, we are live. So I'm just checking the stream now to make sure that this is actually live, because that is what we want to see. Matt, why don't you introduce yourself to the folks at home while I made sure that we are live? I believe that we are, and if we aren't, then you'd be introducing yourself to no one. No, we're live. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the folks at home.
How's it going? I'm Matthew Caveat Zealot. I'm been a fan of the Final Fantasy franchise for over 25 years. Um, Also a musician. I play bass guitar and sing backup vocals in my own ensemble called the Missing Worker. Kind of like alt rock with progressive influences. I'm sure Greg will probably drop the links in the chat at some point in
Oh,
time.
it's already in the
But
description.
there you go. That's the
Man,
description.
I'm
But yeah.
ahead of that. I made sure everyone gets their promo on this channel, man.
Oh, cool. So yeah, Final Fantasy fan of, obviously, other assortment of science fiction fantasy media and big old music lover myself. Beyond that, I don't know what else to say.
Well, so I want to touch briefly
I can't
upon
hear you.
the. Oh, you can't hear me? How about now?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, yeah, that is the joys of Discord. So the good news is the stream will hear me the entire time, as I know you've noticed from the other streams. Whenever they say I can't
Hmm.
hear you, it goes through. But anyway, so the missing worker. So I noticed that the band is called the Missing Worker, and you have a song about your libertarian uncle. So how leftist are you guys?
The band. Each person in the band is at a different spot on the spectrum. I would say the leftmost individual is our lead singer, who borders on somewhat militant leftism. And then there's myself and our one guitar player, which are closer to center left, I suppose. I'm not super great with these political ideology spectrums. You have to forgive me, but and then the two brothers, Todd and Eric, guitar and drums respectively, are pretty comfortably like your Jill Stein, Bernie Sanders type of leftists.
Got it.
If that
So
makes any
so
sense.
one of them's a real leftist and one of them is a fake leftist, and I'll let you folks at home decide which is which. Oh, jokes! We're coming in hot, just like those 14 flames in the background. But no, I definitely, we're talking shop about music, and actually, the instrument I enjoy playing most is bass. I actually, in general, don't like playing instruments. I view instruments
Mhm,
as more like tools to write a song, and then when I actually have to play
mhm.
the instrument, I get kind of annoyed. With the exception being bass. It's like, okay, this is actually a fun instrument to play. I like locking in the groove with a good drummer. I love that rhythm section, just like the feel of the instrument. Like, I don't like playing guitar. I don't like playing piano. It feels like work. Feels like I'm on the clock. Versus bass, like, even though I mostly have been a hired gun for bass, so actually it was work, I was getting paid for it, I didn't mind it as much. But maybe it's because it's easier. It's just like, man, I'm just like, I know there's four strings. I'm really only using one of them. I'm using two if I'm feeling frisky. Three if, like, they're really paying me.
Yeah, no, bass is chill. I'm actually a drummer. Drums is my first instrument. I played drums for about 20 years, but I had played bass as my second instrument for the last about 10 to 15 years. But again, this is the first band I've actually played bass as my full-time instrument in any meaningful capacity. So it's more rhythm-based than the guitar and piano, as you mentioned, and that's probably why it worked for me because I can make melodies and stick to the rhythms as well.
And bass is like, of all the people in a band, they're the most like a team player of the group.
The
Because,
bassist solves problems that most bands don't realize they have. A
right.
good bassist solves problems that most bands don't realize they have.
Like the
So
bassist is just
yeah,
happy to be there. Like the drummer is like, no offense to you, but like, oh wait, let me practice fills in between every song, and everyone else is like, just shut up, stop, stop, stop. The guitarist
you're
is
literally
like,
describing our drummer.
the
Yes.
guitarist is like, look how good I am at my instrument, and they're just like, cool, nobody cares, let's write a song. The singer is like, I barely know how to function, and then the bassist is like, can we just play music and just do it well?
It's funny you mentioned that. The guy who is that, can we just play music and do it well, is our guitarist Mike. And I'm close enough to that. I do. have my fair share of shenanigans in the practice room, but ultimately I'm the second person who's ready to get down to business. So you're
Oh,
not entirely you're pretty spot on.
I've been around the block, man. I've been around the block. And for those who are wondering about the sunglasses, it's not rockstar ego. It's because I was telling Matthew this before the stream. The lighting in my room is terrible. The overhead light doesn't work, and so I've got a lamp in here. But with the sun going down, I don't get as much natural light in here. This room really relies on natural light for the videos I do. That's why the reactions in most streams are done during the day. But then at night, it's dark. It doesn't show up as well. So I got a ring light here, but it's super bright and it was hurting my eyes. So I'm like, okay, I got to wear the sunglasses. So I guess I will look cool. But it's not me trying to look cool. It's because this is actually being functional in this case. So Matthew, you approached me. Well, actually, you asked me my opinion on something in the comments section, and then I said, "Do you want to just do a stream about it?" But it was your idea that sort of kicked off this idea for a stream. So why don't you tell us what we're going to be talking about today? We're going to be approaching it from two different angles. We've been talking about it a little bit. I want you to sort of tell the folks at home what we're doing with this video and what your idea behind it was.
Sure. So as story first players, like you and myself both are, um, one of the first things that I thought about when I started playing Final Fantasy was, what if these were just like movies or TV shows? I mean, they're wonderful games, of course, but at some point there is the desire to just experience the story without having to go through the rigmarole of the gameplay. Uh, in my experience, anyway. So, so the idea of either what if the Final Fantasy games, I mean, not all of them, of course, but like what if the core, if a certain significant titles of them were films slash TV shows, visual media, as opposed to the games, how do you think that would manifest in the world? And I would be approaching it from the alternate timeline aspect, because I would have had this started as far back as like the late '90s, early 2000s, and I had been thinking about this concept since then in the real world. And as far as I'm concerned, from what you've told me, you're approaching it from like if someone, a film studio today, were to be like, we're going to adapt all the already existing Final Fantasy games as visual media, what would you do? Whereas I'm going from, what if the lion's share of them were visual media, TV, movies, and we're focused more on storytelling rather than gameplay. Like the gameplay aspect would be completely removed. It would just be just the story, the exposition, the narrative, the plot, the characters, all that good stuff.
Yeah, the way I decided to approach it is because I have been in the entertainment industry more or less for about like 15 years to varying
I hear
degrees
you.
of success. Like I've done one film score for a feature film. I've written some screenplays and have sent them off to major studios, but then haven't gotten them made, obviously, because I'm still broke. But the point is, I have like enough familiarity with the industry where it is too hard for me to do the alternate timeline thing, and I'm so business minded, just like, okay, no, seriously, like this is how like we would get to do it, like the nuts and bolts of it. You're hiring me to do that because I've been in that brain set for so many years. It's just where my mind went. And when I tried to do it with like your alternate history thing, and I just couldn't do it. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do like the boring businessy pragmatic. It's like, okay, here's how we make money with this. This is what we're doing. So that's the way that
And
I
that's
decided to do
fantastic.
it.
Yeah, that's fantastic because that's an element that I do not factor in whatsoever in any of these. It's like, what would I like to see? When would I like to see it? And possibly like, who would be the creative director? How long would it run? That's pretty much all I give a crap about. And besides, a little mythology that I've been building around it as like a amateur writer myself. Not that I would be writing a book about this, but I can't help but like your business brain, and I suppose my musician creative brain uh, would supplant the framework for this idea.
Oh yeah, no, a lot of people in my band like complained I was too business minded with like marketability and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand like the creative mind is like essential to creating good art. But I think there's sort of a balance to be found. Um, but as far as I completely I lost the thought that I was going with, and that's super annoying. But that is part of the perks of like actively listening is that you're not just listening to tell your point, you're listening to what the other person is saying. So I lost what I was saying, but whatever, that's how it goes.
Maybe it'll come back.
Yeah, maybe it'll come back. But I'm definitely looking forward to, the different perspective we can bring. Oh, now I remember. Is that if I was doing just like what I want to see on screen, it'd be very different. It would basically be if they're giving me the keys to the kingdom, I would just turn FF2 into a trilogy, and that'd be my movie. And then I'd be like, peace, I'm out. I'm turning this into a three-parter, FF2, just FF2, really flashing it out. And don't get me wrong, like FF2 is not like one of my I like it a lot. It's not necessarily like exactly top of the series for me, but as far as like what I feel like I could really add the most to, it'd be FF2. Taking that basic structure, turning it into a trilogy, really fleshing out the characters. I think I could turn that into something excellent versus everything else. I feel like I would be cutting for time and it would be less good, is how I personally feel. And then FF2 is the one that's like, oh, but I could make that better. So that's what I would prefer to do if I had like the artistic druthers. But also, I know no studios are gonna be like, oh, you mean the one that like sold the worst in the series? That's the one you want to adapt? Yeah, okay, bye. So, as long as we're acknowledging this, hey, what's up, Jason? And I've actually figured
I
out
mean, yeah,
a
that would be,
intelligent way to look at the chat because I've got it plugged into my work computer over here. Because what I did the last stream was I held up my phone against these frozen tins and just set it next to my laptop. But the phone charge would die by the end of the stream, so now it's actually plugged into a charger and I can actually see the chat. So I'm going to try to look at that periodically. I'm sorry, you were saying?
oh, no, I mean, it's not to say that there would be absolutely zero real world type of elements to the framework of my approach to this. I mean, I would take into effect like technological limitations. I mean, the fact that people probably wouldn't sit through a 7-hour movie in one go. So I would factor real world aspects, as you put, into my approach, but it would take a second. It would be like the passenger seat, in a way, if that makes any sense at all.
Nope, totally makes sense. And also, don't mind me, I've got a little bit of a cough, so grabbing a cough drop. But I will try to mute and not click when I have it in there.
Sure.
Okay, so what we're going to do to make this nice and pretty, we're going to be doing that. Yeah, we've got the full screen up there of the random FF footage as we go into our cinematic universes. So, yours is a lot bigger than mine. And I feel like it would make the most sense to do one cinematic universe at a time rather than go back and forth between our phases. Because I think that's going to be more coherent. So, in terms of which one we end up doing first, do you have a particular preference? Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first? I feel like I'll be faster, and so we can take
Go
more
ahead.
time with yours. So you want to do mine
Go
first?
ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, I'd love to hear it. I was the one who asked you for your opinion first. You were the one who decided you wanted to hear my opinion too.
Well,
So,
because the thing is, I
um,
realized that'd be like a hefty topic, and doing a video essay on it would be a lot of work, and this is a lazier way of doing it. Like a true bassist, I am lazy. Okay, so basically, the way I approached this was I got hired by a major studio to create a Final Fantasy cinematic universe. And I'm in the meeting with the execs, and I would say, this is an anthology series. You really can't have an interconnected universe. That wouldn't work. I think you should just do an anthology thing and not try to connect the films. And then they say, no, we have to do a shared universe. You have to connect them. And then I say, it's a bad idea. Please don't. And they're like, we're paying you. I'm like, okay. And so this is the what I think would actually happen, make money cinematic universe. I'm hired for this job. So this isn't necessarily the purest expression of the art. This is, here is my map to making money. And so these, I don't necessarily have exactly catchy names for all these films. So it's not just like this is the final name, but this is basically, I would tell you like what each thing is adapting. So if I say, this is Final Fantasy 10-2 or 10-3 or whatever, that's not the final name of whatever the movie would be for marketability purposes. But that's what it would be in terms of like what it's adapting. Does that make sense?
To me, yes, absolutely.
All right, hopefully it makes sense at home. So phase one would be called tentatively Those Chosen by the Planet. And the first film in the cinematic universe would be Final Fantasy VII, specifically Disc 1 of Final Fantasy VII adapted into a movie. Because, look, Hollywood's going to want to make money. They're not going to want to waste any time. Let's get to Final Fantasy VII right away. We want butts in the seats. We want the butts, we want the seats, we want the butts in the seats. This is how you start off a cinematic universe and make some money. Straight up, Final Fantasy VII Disc 1 is the first film in Phase 1. Then the second film in Phase 1 would be Final Fantasy VIII, because that has enough of a similar style. It's sort of like one of the more popular ones in the series, very Nomura-esque, that would continue this hype train. Followed by Disc 2 of Final Fantasy VII as a movie, because we can't go too long without a Final Fantasy VII in this cinematic universe, because we know that is where the bread is buttered. And then Final Fantasy X. We are doing all the big Nomura ones from the Golden Age right away, because, again, we want to make all the money. And so Final Fantasy X would be part of Phase 1. And then it's been too long since we had a Final Fantasy VII movie. We've had one whole movie in between. So then we're on to Final Fantasy VII-3, aka Disc 3. As far as the names of these movies, because this is straight up adapting the games, I would actually probably potentially keep the names of these movies as like Final Fantasy VII, followed by Final Fantasy VIII, followed by Final Fantasy VII-2, followed by Final Fantasy X, followed by Final Fantasy VIII-3. And then just like explaining to the audience, like, look, these movies are like titled weird, but the audience would like have enough media training where they would figure like, okay, this is how the cinematic universe is working. Like the marketing people would figure out how to pitch all of this. And then the big closer of Phase 1, the giant crossover film that everyone wants, that they've been looking forward to, Kingdom Hearts. Because this is Disney. Because Disney is realizing, oh shoot, Universal has Illumination, and they are doing Nintendo movies, and Paramount has the Sonic franchise. We need our own video game franchise, and we've already got that working relationship with Square Enix. So what we're going to do for Kingdom Hearts, it's not only a crossover of the films in this cinematic universe, it is also a crossover of the live-action Disney remakes. We are combining them together for Kingdom Hearts, the big crossover movie that ends Phase 1. And Disney is so happy with all the money they've made, because Kingdom Hearts is a huge success, being able to spin off into its own franchise, while the Final Fantasy cinematic universe is also making all the monies. So that is Phase 1. Thoughts?
I think it's a novel concept. Again, I would approach things differently, of course. But in terms of adapting, you said basically Disc 1, Disc 2, Disc 3 of Final Fantasy VII, not to mention the entirety of 8 and 10. How would you go about, what would you remove? What would you condense? What would you move around so that either a whole game would be one movie or a whole disc would be a singular movie? Like what's the logistics behind that?
The logistics behind that would be kind of similar to how you would like adapt like a Tolkien book into a movie. Just like, trimming the fat, like you'd lose your Tom Bombadils. I don't have the specifics of scene by scene. But basically, my business strategy for this is to milk as much as possible from Final Fantasy VII, because I know that is what the people will want, and they won't necessarily accept two-parters for every single game in the franchise. But 7, like, Disney will want all the money from 7. So this is really, like, almost less from the artistic standpoint and more from, like, what will be accepted business-wise. I mean, there's a lot of filler in these games. But the thing is, 10 would be the one that'd be the toughest in terms of cuts, but you could do it. It'd be a very tight movie, but you could definitely do it. It'd be like, a tight, like 2-hour, 40-minute movie. But you could definitely do like a snappy adaptation of 10, and in the same way that the MCU will take storylines from the comics and not do them exactly the same, but just like have a twist on them. I think that's how you would accept these movies, with maybe 7 being the most faithful because, again, 7 is the cash cow and you can take more time to tell that story.
So then, if you wouldn't mind trying to provide a couple of examples, what would be the Tom Bombadils then of this phase? Like, what if you could pick at least one thing from each of the one scene, one character, one arc, what have you, from each of these properties? What do you think you would do right off the bat?
It's sort of tough to think about what to cut off the bat. But I'm looking at, let's say, Final Fantasy X. You could maybe like cut Lulu, or not necessarily cut Lulu, but just like only give her a couple lines, and she's sort of like a background character. So that'd be the kind of thing you could do. Like, just give her like a couple quick quips where you have all those like ensemble movies. Like Suicide Squad and Guardians, where they have the ensemble cast, but like not all of them are getting the equal amount of being fleshed out. So I think you would give limited time for like her backstory and arc. Like the entire like Yojimbo thing would not make an appearance in there. You'd probably would really skim over like Seymour and Guado Salam. You might even like cut that entire section, but just have like the reveal of Seymour being a villain. So just like have the arranged marriage, you run into him, maybe keep the Mihan High Road thing, but then cut his entire like reveal in that area, and then like have like the big fight being at the wedding instead. So there'd be a bunch of different ways you could adapt and minimize them. And we have a comment in the chat. Did you play World of Final Fantasy? I played a little bit of it, but I also played Record Keeper, which told like abridged versions of the stories. Ever Crisis tells abridged versions of Final Fantasy VII. So I think it's just like you're really just gonna make it as snappy as possible. So I don't have the specifics on it as what I would cut in each film. I did this in a much more vague sense of just like this is the marketing blueprint plan, partially because like I didn't have a lot of time. There's been a lot of crazy stuff going on, but also because there's so many films, it'd be a lot of work going into each one of them. But it'd be things like that. And then it's like looking at 8 as far as what you would cut. There's just like a lot of like silly stuff in 8 that doesn't really go anywhere that you could really trim the fat on. Like there's like the botched like assassination in Timber. You could cut out a lot of that. Like you could basically just like have the train heist, and you could combine that with the scene instead of like having it just be the monster. Then there's an entirely separate thing with Cypher. You could have that all happen in like one scene, and like still have like cameras on the train or something. You don't necessarily need the speed. So there's ways to like combine scenes and to move them forward. But in terms of like what would make sense for this phase, because basically because Disney gave me the job, you had to have a big crossover. And so the games that were in Kingdom Hearts 1 were 7, 8, and 10. So that has to be there to make Kingdom Hearts happen. But 7 you can take the most time on because that makes the most money. And then 8 and 10, you have to get to Kingdom Hearts in a certain number of movies, and so you can't do an 8-2 and a 10-2 that soon. You have to get to Kingdom Hearts pretty quickly. And so that is why we are getting to Kingdom Hearts as quickly as possible, because Disney doesn't want to wait 8 films for their big crossover. They want that to happen soon.
Yeah, all that makes sense. All right.
So phase 2, I have tentative title Crisis of the Heart. We've got 10-2, Final Fantasy X-2 adapting 10-2. We've got Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, because it's been like 2 whole movies since we had a Final Fantasy VII movie, you guys. We need the money. Then we have Final Fantasy VI, which, oh man, this one doesn't do very well. No one goes to see it. Womp womp. And then we have, in my doc, actually labeled it as Final Fantasy VIII for, but it's actually Final Fantasy VII for Advent Children, because, again, it's been so long since we had a Final Fantasy VII movie. We had one whole movie in between. Look, I'm a 7 fanboy, but, like, I'm not excited about this marketing strategy, but I know what's going to get butts in the seats. And then we've got Final Fantasy IX. Um, and then we unite all this together for Kingdom Hearts 2. We've got Kingdom Hearts 2, the big crossover. And then after this, Kingdom Hearts sort of becomes its own franchise and doesn't worry about tying in with these Final Fantasy crossovers. And they say, okay, we're just going to do our own thing with Kingdom Hearts. But Greg, you still need to figure out big crossover events for these Final Fantasy films. So we're still going to make you do that. And I'm like, okay, fine. I will have to figure out what the next phase is. So that moves us on to Phase 3, Fabula Nova Crystallis, where we got Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy X-3, that's right, it's finally a movie, Final Fantasy Type 0, Final Fantasy Dirge of Cerberus, because we can't go through a phase without a 7 movie, Final Fantasy 13-2, Final Fantasy Versus 13, that's right, it gets made into a movie, Nomura gets to direct it, he gets to finally have his cake and eat it too, because Disney will give Nomura what he wants. Final Fantasy XIV, Final Fantasy XVI, and the big crossover event of this is Lightning Returns, which takes the Fabula Nova Crystallis universe and the lore of all the movies that have happened thus far, and then basically does like a factory reset of the universe, because at the end of Lightning Returns, spoilers, it turns into our world, Earth, which is also the world of Final Fantasy IV, and then moves us into Phase 4, the Crystal Saga, where we've got Final Fantasy 1, followed by Final Fantasy 2, followed by Final Fantasy 3, followed by Final Fantasy 4, followed by Final Fantasy 5. And so people who are watching these movies are like, oh, I guess the timeline's going to start to make sense now because of that big reset at the end of Phase 3. All right, well, now things make sense. And we've also got Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn, and Final Fantasy XII. We have no big crossover film in the Crystal Saga because we're just getting our bearings after the universe reset. And that's why we have A Realm Reborn in this universe, because the realm reset through Fabula Nova Crystallis. Then we've got Phase 5, the Crystal War, where we got Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, Final Fantasy XIV Heavensward, Final Fantasy XI, and then we've got crossover movies. Final Fantasy IV, The After Years, Dissidia Part 1 and Dissidia Part 2. Those are the big crossover movies of Phase 5, all in a row, where Final Fantasy IV, The After Years, which, if you played the game, spoilers, it basically ties together the universe of the first 6 Final Fantasy games, which is a pretty cool twist. And so that's how that ties into this phase, where the crystals are all part of this. You know, I won't do too big of spoilers for the After Years, but it ties into the After Years, which leads into the Dissidia Part 1 and 2, which brings back the characters from the Reset universe. So the characters from 16 and 7 and 10, who we thought died in the reset of the universe, nope, they're back for the big Secret Wars crossover fight movie where all the action figures fight each other. And then, after Dissidia, we move on to Final Fantasy VII Remake, Rebirth, and Revival. 3 new 7 movies, all in a row. And that is my Final Fantasy Cinematic Universe. And then they'll tell me to keep making more movies. And then they'll be like Crystal Chronicles, more 14, more 11. They'll do, you know, the other Tactics games, 5-2, and we'll somehow continue making 7 movies until the end of time. And so that is my Final Fantasy Cinematic Universe through the different phases. So basically, Phase 1 is, let's just get this making money right away. 7, 8, 10 Kingdom Hearts. We got to make that cash. Phase 2 is basically more or less of the same, you know, building up to another big crossover before Kingdom Hearts just becomes its own thing. And then Phase 3 is basically setting up the reset of the universe with Fabula Nova Crystallis. But of course, you still need a 7 movie in there. So that is still important. Oh yeah, 15 was supposed to be in here somewhere. You know what? Stick it in Phase 4. Yeah, probably, you know, stick it in... You know what? Stick it in between Dissidia 1 and 2 in Phase 5. There you go. But Crystal Saga is like the reset. Audiences are thinking this is what the universe is going to be. But then, boom, Phase 5 leads into 4 the After Years, and then another reset, because then we need more 7 movies. Marketing.
Very cool.
So before we move on to yours, I will let you comment on those. Again, this isn't necessarily the purest of like artistically satisfying ways to do the films. I mean, if I had my druthers, it would just be like, "There's look, these are all just going to be books, and we're just going to make them all books." The end. But if the homework assignment is make a cinematic universe and make it a shared universe, and also like don't be so weird with it where we don't make money, this is what I would do to make the money.
Nice.
Cynicism. Now, yours, I feel, is much more complicated because you've got. How many films do we have here? 60 films.
Yeah, like, yeah, around there, yeah. Films slash TV shows slash specials, yeah.
Well, go ahead and get into it. So, if you have your doc pulled up,
Sure.
I will let you take the
I
lead. This
do.
is your turn to pitch your cinematic universe.
Okay. So, starting off, well, first of all, I would not title the properties as they are in real life 7, 8, 9. No, I would give them alternate titles, and I think the titles make sense, at least they do to me. So, jump starting this, you could either do this at the time it comes out in the real world 97, or you could push it down to about 2000, which is probably where technologically in our world, the actual meat space, that this would be feasible. But I would start with Final Fantasy VII, just the Midgar portion, the point where the opening cinematic where it shows Midgar for the first time, and then up to the point where they leave Midgar. That would be the entire first movie. And I would title that Materia, A New Threat. And I would use that title in reference to an individual in the Final Fantasy community named MJ Gallagher, who has written unofficial fan novelizations of the Final Fantasy series. He's gotten up to, he's written the first book, the second book. He's done just the Nibelheim portion, just the flashback. And he started the third book, but I think like life things took over, and he probably wanted to start making money with his writing. So it's as of now the third part's unfinished. But yeah, I yanked the A New Threat title from his book, which basically covers the same arc, the Midgar arc. So yeah, just basically as faithful as possible. You would just take the events of the Midgar portion of 7. Hey, all right. Fantastic. I'm just now seeing your screen.
Yeah, I figured I would share that. I happen to have it like right next to me on my bookshelf. So, if anyone sees MJ, tag him, send him this video, and say like, "Hey, we talked about him on stream."
Yeah, right. I have a couple of his. I have the Norse one myself. I think I have a copy of the Nibelheim incident myself somewhere. Anyway, but yeah, so it would just be the Midgar portion, Materia, A New Threat, for the first portion. And then next, sometime later, probably January of 2001, I would have Final Fantasy Tactics adapted, and it would just be called The War of the Lions. And in my head, I have it as a 4-part miniseries, probably each section about an hour and a half to 2 hours each. I will admit I did not finish the game because I found the game to be, and as nicely possible, a slog. I couldn't get into it, but the lore, the mythos, the characters, the events, all that's fascinating. It's some of the finest writing I've ever seen in a video game, honestly. And I think it deserves to have its story told without quite the unfortunate, in my opinion, gameplay getting in the way. I know there are many people who love the game. I have several friends who swear up and down it's the greatest thing since bacon. It's not my bag, unfortunately. I got it to like the 4th battle and I turned it off. Sorry, but yeah. But I think as in terms of a story, it could work really well as a TV miniseries. Thoughts on either that or the first thing I said, Greg?
This one I think I'm going to need more as we get into like where this is all going, because
Okay.
I think because it's a parallel world where these don't exist as video games, marketing it as an anthology series I think makes more sense. But I think because I'm so used to them
It,
being, the marketing brain in me is like, I don't know how catchy of a title like Materia is in terms of like normies. My thing where I think is like, how do you sell this to normies who aren't into necessarily the fantasy genre in the way that like you sold Game of Thrones to normies? And don't get me wrong, like I think Game of Thrones is great, but I'm always thinking about like, how do you sell this to someone who doesn't have familiarity with the subject matter? And it's something that actually
Mhm.
I made a lot of mistakes on with my band in particular, because I was
Mhm.
doing like 70s 80s style glam rock with visual K elements that required you be an expert in the music from the 70s, the 80s, and like the 80s in Japan for you to fully appreciate what we were doing. And I think it was too niche where like a normal person couldn't grasp it immediately. And so like we had some pop songs that people could grasp immediately, but the overall package confused people because it required so much knowledge of music history to like get it. And so with some of the titles, I'm thinking to myself, is someone going to be able to get it immediately? But I think as you explain more of what we have going on, I think it'll paint a clearer picture to me. But because you have
You got it. Yeah.
Materia, New Threat, and
Mhm.
War of the Lions being so drastically different, I'm not seeing how they
Mhm.
tie together as a franchise quite yet. Versus like FF1 to FF2, like even though they were
Mhm.
drastically different, they still tied
Mhm.
together pretty well where it made sense. I'm
I
not
see.
seeing the through line yet, but I think it'll make more sense as we continue to go through these.
Well, sure. I figured I should get it out of the way first that this is going this phase, quote unquote phase of the cinematic portion is not necessarily not a lot of emphasis on the shared universe aspect. As of right now, it's basically treated how the Fox movies were producing the Marvel ones. They were just movies. They're standalone. They were an anthology. As of right now, they were just made because people wanted to see these things come to life on the screen. So right now, I'm not putting too much emphasis, or really any emphasis, on any shared universe content at this point. Um, so I'm just treating these as individual releases, kind of in their own kind of vacuum. The where I'm tying together the fact that I would put the War of the Lions after Materia would be because with Final Fantasy is the franchise title, right? So, and it would be like technically the full title would be Final Fantasy Materia: A New Threat, Part One: A New Threat, you know, or Final Fantasy: The War of the Lions, you know. But we wouldn't put Final Fantasy in front of everything all the time. I'm just not including it because it's implied. We know these are Final Fantasy games and properties. So, um, and the thing is, like, because the first movie would be closer to science fiction, you know, almost bordering on the edge of cyberpunk action. And it's like, well, it's Final Fantasy. Where's the fantasy? Because the first disc it's got elements of fantasy for sure, but the real fantastical elements open up over the course of the game. Whereas with War of the Lions, that would present more of a final or a fantasy atmosphere. Like when you think fantasy, you think of like that type of technological environment, you know, like the chocobos, horses, you know, medieval type stuff. People think more often than not, people I've talked to equate fantasy to medieval, and so you give them a medieval property. That's my logic.
All right, well, let's continue going down. When you explain the fox, then that makes a bit more sense. So I'm getting it now.
Yeah, yeah, right. Because at the time that I was imagining these things as movies, there was the idea of a cinematic universe, like a shared universe, at least in the West, was not really anything that was a thing. I mean, there might have been some like underground indie things that might have been in a shared universe content, but again, to my knowledge, the big ticket items, it wasn't a thing. They were just properties, and so I'm thinking that like more franchise, like Star Wars. You know, it's all in the same universe because universes are massive. You know, I think we need to understand that not everything is tied together quite so closely in a universe. You know, maybe the solar system, perhaps, but we're not going to call it, the Final Fantasy cinematic solar system. That's just too much to say. But anyway, um, moving on. The next thing that I had in mind is I think that if we're going to adapt the next part of Final Fantasy VII, the arc, I do think that the Nibelheim incident needs its own block. Whether that's a TV special, whether that's a tight 80-minute film that's released, I think just a piece of media dedicated just to the flashback the party goes to calm. Cloud does the flashback. They show Sephiroth for the first time on screen, and it's just that, right? So that's where I'm going. That would probably come out later in the year, like December of 2001 or so. The next thing I would open up would be the Final Fantasy VIII TV series, because I do think that with the dynamic of the party and it would be very high production, high quality values. No doubt, it would probably be premium quality programming, but I would call it Successor. The show would be called Successor, and this would be if we're going to be as close to our technological timeline, sometime like fall of 2002. This would come out. You would have season 1, of course, be the beginning of the disc 1 of Final Fantasy VIII. What's up?
I'm feeling this would be similar to. I'm sorry, I was muted by accident. I said I have the feeling this would be like a Josh Whedon TV show. For some reason, I'm getting
probably,
FF8
yes.
meets Buffy. Is where I feel like this show would probably end up being.
Yeah, I don't think you're too far off. I think that's subconsciously what I was thinking. Just if Joss Whedon had like Disney money in 2002-ish to make this show. But yeah, like season 1 would be the beginning of the game up until Squall gets iced in the chest by Idea. Season 2 would be the District D prison all the way until Renoa becomes possessed by Ultimecia, and then season 3 would be the rest of the game. And with as far as Successor goes, I would keep it to 3 seasons, because Disc 4 is just Ultimecia's Castle, and we're not going to have a whole season dedicated to Ultimecia's Castle. I'm not. I don't see it. But it would pretty much just be the main beats of the game. Keep it as tight as possible. Keep everything as integral as possible. So all the fun side questy stuff, which is obviously one of the higher points of the game in my opinion, it just wouldn't be there. It would just be the main beats, the main plots, the main arcs.
I don't know. So here's the thing. One of the best seasons of Once Upon a Time is the season where they just like hang out in hell for a season. So I'm just saying, you could do an Ultimecia's Castle season, and that might be the best one. I'm just saying.
Maybe you could. Who knows? I'm flexible, as this is not real. So I'm just saying. I just when I was thinking of this, I just didn't see a whole season dedicated to it. But then again, this is back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and Once Upon a Time has since come out. So yeah. Okay, so that would be that. And then the next thing I would have would be about a month later, fall of 2002, would be the Final Fantasy VI cartoon, Balance and Ruin, is what I'm titling it. You can argue over whether or not it's a marketable title or not. That's not something that really factors into my brain, but this is what I'm going with, because I think in order to tell the story of Final Fantasy with as much of the fun stuff and the nuances as possible, I think it would have to be an animated series. Because Ultros in real circa 2002 effects, not really feeling it. I think it would have to be like a cartoon.
No, early CG, like on those bad episodes of Buffy, that'd be sick.
The conspicuous CGI.
That'd be so sick.
Maybe.
That's like, we're talking
with
dancing
Ultros,
baby quality CGI. Ultros? Yeah, man.
The Mogs in the Mog battle in the cave there. Yeah, so basically just take all the major. Well, actually, you could probably, as a cartoon, you could just adapt everything you want. You can include all the characters, even Gogo Uemaru, as occasional like guest characters that appear from time to time randomly for no reason. Yeah, that's what I have for 6. I would have that be a show for maybe 2 or 3 seasons. I mean, the final season would obviously just be the World of Ruin. And that would be that as far as I'm concerned. The next property I have going on, this would probably be winter of 2002-ish, would be Materia the Animated Series. So basically all the elements of Final Fantasy VII that from the moment they leave COM and go out into the world. I don't really want much left out from Final Fantasy VII as far as adaptation. I think it's my favorite as far as a story perspective. And I think all of it's just awesome, even the side crap. So this cartoon would just basically have Fort Condor. Let's say it would start with Fort Condor in season 1, or with Chocobo, sorry. The Chocobo Ranch, the Midgar Zolom, the scene in the Mithril Cave, Fort Condor. maybe to the point where they use Mr. Dolphin to get up to the Junon Tower. Vincent and Yuffie would make an appearance in the cartoon. They would not make an appearance in real life. It's to kind of be a head nod Easter egg to those who can traverse between dimensions, as optional characters could be. Just basically, they would just be the cartoon. They wouldn't appear in live action. And pretty much, yeah, anything else in 7 that just would not really fit into a movie framework. Does that make any sense?
That does. So this is like almost like the Animatrix, or like that thing that came out in between Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, just like fleshing out the world a little bit more.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. And we got some comments in the chat. Oh, Adventures of TNT, what is up, my dude? Start FF8 off with the history of Squall Cypher. Yeah, that could be a way to do it. Start off with the rivalry. I think, because they started in the middle of the story. And he's saying FF6 is a slow burn and thinks it's too complicated to be animated. That's
the beauty of it. I think because it would be more on the lines of like the Redwall cartoon that came out around that time. It would be animated, but it wouldn't be necessarily for kids. It would be complex. It would more akin to Gargoyles or X-Men or Batman the Animated Series.
Okay, yeah, I could see FF6 in a Gargoyle style, but like they better have like the Moogles be extra annoying in it. Because of that. I mean, don't get me wrong, like I love Moogles, but like I just know like that animation style, they would make the Moogles super annoying, but I am down for that annoying stuff. I have mixed feelings on keeping Yuffie and Vincent only in the animated series, especially because, man, goth kids would eat up Vincent. And I'm also thinking...
sure would.
And also marketability, like, oh man, here's a cute up-and-coming, teenage actress for people to crush on. I mean, I don't know. You could totally have, a young, I don't know, who would have been around at the time? Like a young Demi Lovato as Yuffie or something like that.
The one who played Knives Chow, Ellen Wong, the one who played Knives Chow in Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah. You could have her. Someone like that at that time. I think that could definitely, sell to the folks at that time. As that would have been right. Also, Brenda Song's heyday too. So you could have had her. Actually, she would be a really good Yuffie. I just thought that she would actually nail that at that time. She would have nailed Yuffie as a character. That is really weird. I never would have thought about casting Brenda Song as Yuffie, but in this parallel universe, she would be perfect at that time.
And it's not that I wouldn't love to see, Yuffie and Vincent adapted into the OG Final Fantasy story live action. I'm just having a hard time. Or I was having a hard time reconciling trying to keep as much of the original game intact, but then just adapt it into screen. And since they're optional characters, you have to make some changes. And changes are not bad. I just could not make them at the time I was envisioning these things as what they were. But I'm open to any and all suggestions and or changes.
T is correct in the chat. There you go. That's your answer on how to get normies into Final Fantasy hot characters. I mean, look, if we're selling this to normies, not just nerds who want to appreciate great storytelling like us, gotta sell it to the normies. Give them you don't have to overly sexualize, but give them a cute girl, man. That'll sell it to the normies, especially if we're doing television. Cast Brenda Song. I'm so awful with my marketability.
No, it's cool. So yeah, the cartoon would go on for as long as the game went on, just telling as much, whatever. Then the next property I had in mind would be Final Fantasy II, or I would call it Materia, the Man in the Black Cloak. This would probably be a spring 2003 release. And this would chronicle basically Cloud and Party chasing after Sephiroth up until the City of the Ancients. And whatever the powers that be or whatever want to keep in there in terms of fleshing out a coherent narrative. We can keep the Gold Saucer. We would probably start with Junon, honestly, just right from there, because the cartoon would establish that Mr. Dolphin, launched Cloud up there, and then perhaps that's where the season ends, and then the movie comes out, and Cloud is up there in Junon, and then they would, board the ship. And then they got to the gold saucer. They would have the shit at the gold saucer. Sorry, stuff at the gold saucer. And then they would probably Cosmo Canyon, obviously, up until probably you could probably just jump to the City of the Ancients, if you wanted to cut this for time. Because the issue with doing this as a movie is that they're going from place to place to place to place to place to place to place, and like the only part of realism that clicks in here is that the budget for filming all of these places, it would be like Macklemore's music video for Can't Hold Us. He went to like 4 different continents or something like that, and it would just be insane. And I don't know if they would recoup the losses. Well, not losses, but they would recoup the funds. But whatever. This is what I was talking about, Greg. I'd have a tendency to veer off into tangents.
All right, so we're at what, the Man in the Black Cloak. So then we're at Memoria. So I'm guessing that's pivoting to Final Fantasy IX.
Yeah. So like a late fall winter release of this would be CGI. This would be a TV series. Basically, Final Fantasy IX told over the course of 3 or 4 seasons of CGI goodness. You would keep as much of the game as possible in there, and just adapt it right from story to screen. Have Quina basically have more of a role as be more comic relief, and give Amarant less to do. Yeah, I think that the story writes itself, at least in my mind, anyway.
And so then Chronicles, where is that?
Chronicles, yeah, that's based off of the U.S. only, I think, release of Final Fantasy IV and Chrono Trigger. That would pretty much be mainly focused for like a summer 2004 release of a TV show, which would be mostly the Final Fantasy IV adventures, pretty much told straight from the game, straight from game to screen. Cecil, Golbez, all that good stuff. Told over the course of the game, and perhaps this is where we can start getting creative with our changes. You can start incorporating characters from maybe 3 or 5 into there, because I just right up front, I don't have anything set aside for 3 or 5 in terms of its own established individual property. 5 I never finished. I got to the fire ship, I think it's called. I don't know. And I didn't continue with it and wasn't really crazy about it. But I liked the vibe. I just didn't like the game. And 3, I got up to the final dungeon. I didn't go through it because I don't have the patience for 2 hours with no save points.
You know, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's rough, but it's not that bad once you know what you're getting into.
Okay. Yeah, so you could probably just have Luneth or more so Refia. I think Refia should have a glow up. Refia should get more of a character boost. Have her sort of intermingle with the party of 4, and then just sort of go back to what she's doing. Maybe have Bartz and Ferris pop in during the course of the Chronicles adventure. I mean, you would make some changes here and there to accommodate for that, or not. But that's just what I had in mind. It's kind of like mostly 4, but also sort of like give some nods to the 3 HD remake and the 5 game.
Yeah, sprinkle it in. And so yes. You said this was a series. You said.
Yeah, it would be a live action series. I don't see it as a cartoon. You would actually have like casting and some good stuff. And that's what I would Chronicles. I wouldn't call it 4 just because it wouldn't just be 4. It would be mostly 4, but since after years established that all the first 6 games are connected, that I think it would be okay to pepper in some 3 and 5 characters and events, and it wouldn't overly compromise the narrative of 4. In a way, I'm not a screenwriter, so I don't have an outline for you, but I think it could be done, unless
Yeah, no. The thing is, you could definitely. The thing is, when I was coming up with my list, I could have just said, I will just take elements from all these different games and put them together and just make a bunch of new ones. So, like, mix characters from 4 with characters from 3 with characters from 2 and just, like, make an entirely new thing. And I definitely, like, that could be an approach that I could do as a screenwriter, just, like, take all these characters and just rearrange them in different ways. I just didn't do that because that would be coming up with, like, 20 different films with like outlines for all of them, and like all those different changes, like beat by beat. So I decided it would be more interesting approach to say, like, if I was doing like more generalized adaptations of each story, what would I do? But I've actually thought about like remixing different Final Fantasies, like taking Yang from FF4, but like, what if you stuck him in the world of Final Fantasy VI? How would that all fit together? So I think there's ways you can mix and match that I think are really interesting, and you could like do the entire series from the ground up with that approach. So I think it definitely can be done and can be done well because I mean Marvel has shown that they can do that well. So definitely a possibility.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So then the next property that I have on the list here it would be Spirits Within, but instead of a CGI film, it would be live action, and it pretty much just told it just how it was, right as it was. Instead of CGI, it would be live action,
And it still
and this would be
bombs
around
because
the same
nobody
time.
cares.
It would still bomb. It would still bomb because people would be like, I don't see how this ties into anything. But down the line, if we hang in there for as long as we do, I have an idea of how to tie it back in. But as of right now, it's a standalone film. It might bomb because it's more mundane than the previous entries I've just mentioned. But regardless, some films bomb. Not everything that is on this list will necessarily do well, because I'm not doing it based on financial what have you. It would just be like, what I think would be cool to see if this were, visual media instead of games. So yeah, the Spirits Within, and then so a late winter release would be the next TV show, and that would be the Final Fantasy X TV show Spira, because I think with the narrative, the whole thing is told through a series of narrations and flashbacks via Titus, and to tell that over the span of 3 seasons or so, I think would be super cool. Um, I don't know where exactly I would draw the breaks. I think that at least season 2 would end with the wedding in Bevel,
Mm-hmm.
and then going on from Comlands onward to the end of the game would be season 3. I think from the beginning of the game up until I don't know if I'm drawing the line too early, but perhaps the Operation Mihen
Mm-hmm.
would be season 1. Um, and I would call it Spira. By the way,
Yeah,
I would just call
yeah.
the show Spira because of the world. Yeah.
So
So
here's a
that's
curiosity I have for you because with a
mhm,
lot of these, especially when you're doing television, the budget is a
mhm,
lot smaller on television. You have less leeway for special effects and fantastical backgrounds, which 10 has a lot of those. And
mhm,
like big action set pieces, you maybe can do like one per season. Like Game of
mhm,
Thrones revolutionized television with how they could have cinematic quality fights, but they could only afford that
mhm,
one per season.
mhm.
So if you're talking about doing a 3 season show, do you have any idea about where you would cut like the action, how you would approach like Aeons, for example? Do you have any thoughts on that, especially given the technology of the era?
Sure. Aeons, I think, would be few and far between. They would pretty much come out only when they were plot relevant. Like at the I mean, I know that Una does her summoning and sending of the souls in what was it, Kilika?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But the Aeons don't appear, and I think the Aeons would be few and far between, like precision strike things, which is like, oh, Una pulls out, was it Valifor? She must mean business because not only is this costing us a crap load of money, um, it's a giant beast bird monster thing it's not going to like flick someone in the chest and cause 3 damage. No, this is a cataclysmic event, so it would be few and far between. And she
Unless we're
would, yes,
going live
collect the
full Power
eons.
Rangers and just like have dudes in suits and just film them from a,
Just kaiju.
from a high angle.
Yeah, you can do that. Well, but to answer your financial question, this is of course an alternate timeline. So there's not to say that like perhaps there isn't more funds in the entertainment business. Maybe this is a timeline where our taxes are being used for stuff that actually benefits its citizens, and the state lines are drawn in a way that actually benefits its citizens. Maybe this is a timeline where just everything goes right economically, and we're able to have all this extra money to just play with.
Oh, so this is the timeline
Again,
where
this is
Reagan
stuff.
never got elected. Got it.
This is the timeline where Hamilton survived his duel.
Oh man, we're really going back.
Yeah, if we want to go that route. But if we're going to try to keep it
This is the
just to the
timeline
past.
where Joan says, "You know what? I don't trust this Gilderoy guy. I just don't trust him."
Yeah, so again, that's not something I thought about. But again, if anyone who has an actual TV producer mind can pop in and be like, this won't work, this won't work. then I'm sure they could rearrange it in a way that does work. But as of right now, my goal is to keep as much of the original source intact and faithful, but also in certain cases where it's not possible. But yeah. So the next property I have would be the third part and final part of the OG Final Fantasy VII would be Materia Part 3, The Cetran Legacy. And that would be winter of 2005 release, around the same time as, well, no, Revenge of the Sith was spring of 2005. But in terms of like technological cinema-ness, yeah, you would have it basically from the point where they arrive at the crater and the reunion up until the end of the game. And that would just be the third and final installment of the original Final Fantasy VII game adapted into film. And that's probably where you probably make the most amount of creative changes. Like, for instance, I had in mind that Kate Sith, or Ketchi, however you want to pronounce it, dies legit during the Temple of the Ancients and doesn't come back and be like, "Hi, I'm Ketchi Part 2." You know, it happens in the third film where Ketchi helps to rescue Tifa from Junon after she's caught and interrogated. So it would be kind of a holdover. So like starting with the second installment, you'd be more creative. With the third installment, you could probably be the most creative, especially if you decide you want Yuffie and the Vincent stuff and the Zack flashback. Okay. So after that, then next property would be Final Fantasy Origins. That would be a spring 2006 release. That's the TV show. Again, and these TV shows, these ones, especially like Chronicles and Balance and Ruin. Well, no, Balance and Ruin's a cartoon. Chronicles and Origins, they would be more along the lines of like a Xena, Hercules type of production values. I feel you can get away with having more emphasis on, exposition rather than crazy special effects. Like the effects would be implied. And Origins is where I would give time to have Final Fantasy II have its story told, with references to the OG original Final Fantasy I in reference. Like, this happened long, long ago. Like, there would just be one Warrior of Light, or four, it doesn't matter. But basically, you would have the Warriors of Light were like characters of myth who defeated chaos and whatnot, but Final Fantasy II would be Firion, Maria, Guy, and all them basically traversing throughout the course of the game. And that's a game I will admit I did not get very far into because, again, my patience with games, especially if I'm not having fun, I stop. So I did not experience much of Final Fantasy II as a game at all. But I did have a 3-pack of the novelizations, and I did. Again, this is a long time ago. I did read through Final Fantasy II as a novelization, and it's a great story.
Interesting. So wait, hold on. The novelization of 2,
in my opinion, from my experience of the game.
So the novelization of 2, is it a fan novelization or is it the official novelization?
I don't know. I no longer possess it. I think it was a fan translation.
Yeah, because the thing is, the official Japanese novel of 2 is very different from the game. And it's like been translated a little bit piecemeal by fans. There's an audio book of it on the channel that I read like the first few chapters of because, again, it's never come out in English, and they make a bunch of wild changes to it. And so it's pretty cool and weird. And so if you have a full version of that, I would be very interested because as far as I know, it's never been fully translated. So I imagine it's like a fan adaptation of the game into a novel, but that is definitely cool. And for those interested, look up the Final Fantasy II audiobook on this channel. You'll find some fun stuff there.
Yeah.
So I thought that was relevant because I was like, oh man, does he have a copy of that? That sounds cool.
Oh no, sorry, no. But like I said, I found the novel, whatever version I have, to be more interesting than what I experienced in the game.
So what Queen song would be the theme song for the show? That's the real question.
Ooh, either Ogre Battle or Seven Seas of Rye.
All right, there we go. Oh man, the show would be sick. I'm down for that.
Yeah. So yeah, that would run for, I don't know, however many seasons it would run. I don't know how long the actual narrative is. I'm going to be conservative and say maybe 2 or 3 seasons.
Hey man, with Queen as your
however long
theme
it needs to
song,
be.
that's like a 12 season show there, man. That'll just go forever.
If you can come up with enough material to keep people entertained for 12 seasons, Lord, Xena and Hercules did for at least 7 seasons, so I don't see why Final Fantasy 2 would be completely out of the realm. But yeah, moving onward, the next property I had would be the start of the Final Fantasy 11 franchise, and I would title it Vana'diel. And I would start, and it would be like a fall of 2006 release. This would be I want to say a made for TV movie type of thing in terms of production values. This wouldn't see a cinematic release because at the time of coming up with these things, and even still today, I've never played a minute of Final Fantasy 11. Like honestly, Greg, the largest amount of familiarity I have with this game is your video encapsulating all of the DLCs and stuff of the game, and I just knew of it through vicarious sources.
How was that
You know
video
what I mean?
for you? I'm very curious as someone who has like not touched a second of it. How did that video like? Did you feel satisfied with it? I'm just really curious because I get a lot of 11 fans talking, but not as much people who haven't played the game.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, as a cursory overview, which is I felt what you were going for, I think it was phenomenal, fantastic. Considering I had again next to no familiarity with anything involving the game whatsoever, and by you covering as much as you did, as well as you did, it made me go, "Oh, okay. I may have to rethink this. Maybe from what you say in terms of the scope, maybe these stories do deserve to be told cinematically in a theater. Maybe they do." But from at the time I was coming up with this stuff, again, I saw these more as like again made for TV films, like a 100-minute, 90-minute type of thing. And I would have started with Vana'diel: Rise of the Zealot, and I skipped the main game again. Never played it, didn't know anything about it, and two, upon you covering it in your video, it seemed to me like the whole business with the Shadow Lord seems more like a Voldemort type of thing, like a grander scope villain, where like over the course of the adventures they would deal with the Shadow Lord, but like this is or like Sauron, from Lord of the Rings. Like that's a picture I got. But of course, in the main game, his arc is resolved like immediately. So I don't know how off my rocker I am for doing this, but I would just start with Rise of the Zealot, from what little I know of it. I would a big change I would do is because since 11 is a player character, I would have Aldo be the main character, and of course there would be some changes that would need to be made, and it would be the adventures of Aldo doing through whatever main beats only in Rise of the Zealot, with mention to the greater scope of the Shadow Lord.
I think that actually that makes sense. That would be as far as like an interesting way to inverse the story of 11. I think that is really clever because it is weird how like the Shadow Lord is sort of like the first big final boss you beat, but that's because he was like intended to be the final boss of the game. But it almost feels like it would make more sense if like you beat the Xylart brothers first, Xylart, Potato Potato. If you beat them first, and that led to like Shadow Lord being the secret like Overlord boss, I think that would have been more satisfying because I also thought he was like a better character. But also, hey, I'm glad that the video was good for you in that regard, and I did my best to make it like be like, oh, I'm not giving you spoilers, but I'm giving you just enough to know if you'd want to check it out. So after Xylart, you've got some more Spira. Looks like the Gullwing Chronicles, which I assume means 10-2.
That is exactly what it is. It is 10-2. That would come out. If there's going to be 3 seasons of Spira, then this would have to come out like a little longer afterwards. So maybe if I may have to push it down to like I don't know, 2006, 2000 no, not 2006, 2007, 2008 release. It would be like a 6-part TV show, TV special, detailing again all just the main events of the Gullwings. Paige, Yuna, and YRP, Yuna, Riku, and Paige. And in their adventures of revisiting the world of Spira and dealing with Venga Gun at the very end, the whole notion of Shuyin and Len, as well as the world of Spira, how that changed after the defeat of Sin, seemingly for good. Yeah, so that's how I see it. Just kind of as a Lanyap, I suppose, Spira arc, because in this universe I do not have 10-3 adapted, because at the time I had no idea what the story. I still don't really even know what the story is. I've seen and heard things about it, but I don't have enough familiarity to
When Tidus grows up, he
conceptualize
becomes a
what this movie.
blitzball, and then it explodes.
That's the story.
That it sounds like I'm joking, but that's actually kind of what happens in 10-3.
All right then. So yes, but as far as I'm concerned, this would
Spoilers.
be the last. That's fine. This would be like the last time you see the Spira crew in any meaningful capacity for at least quite a while. Yeah. So after that would be Vana'diel Chains of Promethea. That would be like a fall 2007 made-for-TV movie special, or again, if the scope is appropriate enough, a cinematic. Greg, do you know which the DLC Shintaro made her first appearance?
She first appears in the base game of 11. So she appears in a bunch of different ones, but begins in the base game. If you go to Windurst, you'll see Shantoto. As far as Chains of Promethea, the way I would picture it, if you're doing your cinematic universe, I think if you're making Rise of the Xylard a TV movie, I think that's sort of like the sleeper hit that they didn't expect would be as big. And then Chains of Promethea is like, okay, now we're up in the ante to a full cinematic movie because we didn't think that would go over as well.
Okay.
Is how I think that would be, because Chains of Promethea like has the traditional Final Fantasy scope. Like when you think of a normal mainline FF game in terms of like how big it is, that's what Chains of Promethea is. Like it is that exact pacing, amount of traveling the world, the different biomes, the large cast of characters, fighting the Demiurge at the end of the game. Like that is pure on what Final Fantasy is. So I think that would be your upgrade to cinemas from the made-for-TV movie, the High School Musical 3 of the Vana'diel franchise.
Okay. No, I could roll with that. But yeah. So Shintaro makes her appearance, but she's an NPC, right? At what point does she become a bit more relevant to the plot events of the game?
So it's...
Or does she at all?
Alright, so if you do the Windurst path, she is somewhat relevant in that, but not like a major character. She's like a, like, you know, decently, trying to think of like a good comparison. Not quite like a Beatrix level character, but like maybe a step below that. Maybe like Marcus in FF9.
Okay.
Where just like, she's definitely there, definitely present if you're doing the Windurst route. And then as far as like being a more major character, that's in Treasures of Outergon, is when she really steps up and becomes like, okay, she's a Steen Sealer, like, why am I blanking on the dude's name? The wrestler in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, Drax.
Drax, yeah.
Yeah. So she becomes like a Drax, you know, Rocket Raccoon kind of character once you get to Treasures. We're just like part of the main cast, scene stealer, everybody loves her. That's when you really get the Shantoto juice.
Fantastic. All right. Yeah, I just wanted to know for scoping and comparison reasons, because again, next to no familiarity with the game, but again, I do know Shantoto. So yeah, there would be. I have nothing planned for 2008 because at this time, in spring of 2009, you would see Advent Children, Materia Advent Children, become a live-action cinematic adaptation. It would be the complete Advent Children, all 2 hours, not the original hour and 40-minute version. It would, yeah. I think if everything went as faithfully as possible from the original trilogy of movies that I proposed, plus the Nibelheim incident special, you could probably just rip Advent Children straight into live action. How it translates, if enough changes were made to, and if people followed the cartoon along the whole lines, then you could be whatever changes you wanted to make to Advent Children, you could, and it would be just as Nomura as it is in real life. Like, just basically try to live action the Nomura-ness of the CGI game into live action, and it would be mixed, because people would be like, this is awesome, and some people would be like, this didn't need to exist. And that's kind of the polarizing dialogue that I kind of would like to create in this parallel timeline. where it would be the beginning of the infamous compilation of FFs. I mean, it wouldn't be called that, but it would be like the movie cinema TV equivalent of the compilation of Final Fantasy VII, to where people are like, okay, you know.
No, I'm
Okay,
definitely down for the controversy. So yeah, you've got them piling up there with Advent and Dirge back to back.
yeah, Dirge would be a summer of 2009 release, and it would be a hell, how many episodes do I have it listed in my spreadsheet there? Yeah, 6 episodes. 6 episodes. It would be Vincent's time to shine. Because as I originally left him out of the original films, but he's a part of the cartoon, and he makes a cameo appearance in Advent. Well, not cameo. He has a solid role, to my recollection, a solid minor role in Advent Children. But this would be his time to shine. It would, again, all the main beats, all the main story stuff from the Dirge of Cerberus game, translated over 6 episodes of a high production premium TV show. Introducing Shulk as a major character in the franchise, getting Yuffie some more screen time, letting Reeve redeem himself with the World Health Organization, all that fun stuff.
So,
Yeah.
but hear me out on this. Instead of a TV show, and I'm just setting up for a joke, so just bear with me. Make this the Wolverine origins of the franchise. So then wherever Vincent walks away, explosions follow him. And also make his weapons really bad CGI. Okay, sorry. All right, my joke is done. Continue.
No, and that's what's even funnier is that I can actually see a creative team actually doing that because they're like, oh, this new CGI is newfangled. We thought of many ways to think how we could. We never thought if we should, kind of approach.
Can you tell I have industry brain after writing so many spec scripts?
And that's wonderful. My head is in the cloud in the creative realm, and it's nice to have someone basically check me and bring me back to earth with some of this stuff.
And just like, no, here's how they would ruin it. This is what you need to do.
And his guns would be CGI. It'd be fantastic. So and then for a fall of 2009 release, you'd have Treasures of Ott Urgan, which I'm assuming is a similar scope to Chains of Promethea. That could also probably be a cinema release as well.
That one is actually less. That's more of like a slice of life sitcom. That would be better served as a sitcom, actually, with like occasional action.
Perfect, and that would be the opportunity for Shantado to get her glow up as a more major character in the franchise. The whole rhyming thing, and Shantado in this parallel timeline would be like an extremely like fan favorite character, to where anyone who has like next to no familiarity with the Vana'diel franchise of Final Fantasy would know Shantado, So that's all I know of Treasure.Urgan based upon your video.
Yeah, so basically Treasures is like, imagine if you took like a Final Fantasy game that's like the length of like a Final Fantasy game, but like set it in a sitcom situation where like it's a bunch of coworkers hanging out, and that's what it is. And so it's like, it's weird, but it's awesome because of how weird it is, because you're just like, what is this?
I'd be all about that. Yeah. Kind of like a WandaVision, I suppose, but for the Final Fantasy community.
A little bit more Seinfeld and It's Always Sunny-esque than WandaVision. So like,
gotcha.
Like that kind of tone with like, don't get me wrong, like you still have like, okay, now we have to kill God at the end because it's Final Fantasy, but so much of it is just like, if 12 was a sitcom, is what it is.
I see. Okay, well, speaking of 12, the next fall property would be the Final Fantasy 12 adaptation, and if we're going to keep it as close to the original game as possible, first of all, I'd be calling it Fortress, and this would again be fall 2009. If we're going to keep as much of the original beats as possible, the main beats going on, I would think it would have to be a TV show, mostly just because of the clunky exposition, the Marquis Andor, little bits of lore that are inserted here and there. Maybe about 3 seasons worth if we're going to do it. If we're going to make it into a film, then we'd give it the old Greg Troyan treatment and just basically do it how you'd want to see it, because you and I probably think a little bit differently about 12. Like it's consistently like lowest on your lists of games, and I completely understand why. But what made me enjoy the game so much was because of its westernness. The fact and the bland beiges and browns of the color palettes really didn't faze me. Like, I would have been tickled pink if, like, as I watched these videos on YouTube, just of the main cutscenes and the CGI cutscenes. I'm like, I would love to see this in real life. And so if we kept it as close to its original format, it would be a show. But if it were chopped up and smooshed around, it could be like a movie to 3 movies, depending on how much you want to keep or get rid of. One thing I would do in terms of changes would be what's always bothered me in 12 is there's the CGI cutscene. It introduces the Urutanyensa sandfolk, who are like, it's this really awesome scene of them riding through the sand dunes under these sandfish, and you think they're going to be this big deal, but they're just regular mooks in the combat. I think they should, if it were a show, they would play a greater role in at least that arc of the story when they're traversing on their way to the Rafe Wall's tomb. So that's like one major thing that I would do. But the rest of it, I would keep more or less intact. What do you think?
Well, I'm not surprised that the guy who's more into alt rock is into like beige and brown, and then the hair metal guy's like, where are my bright colors? This sucks. So I mean, no surprises there. As far as 12, I think the trick with 12, if you cut out a bunch of the filler, and there's a lot of filler in 12, there's a good story in there, but you really got to trim the fat. So like, hey, you know how we're going to hit the same character beat with Ash like the entire game? Let's just do it like twice in the movie. Problem solved. So, I mean, there's a good story in there. And I don't dislike 12. It's just I like it less than everything else. But if you're looking at like my list of, 100 favorite video games, it's probably like, I don't know, maybe like top 30 or 40. So like it's pretty high up there. It's just it's lower in a very good series.
Like, I don't dislike With the Beatles or Beatles for Sale. I just like them considerably less than the rest of their discography.
Well, that's also a wrong opinion, but we'll get to that later.
Fair enough.
Early Beatles is better than latter day Beatles. Don't at me.
I can see why you'd say that. I'm not going to touch that at the moment because I also love early Beatles. But anyway, alt rock musician brain here. So moving on, my next thing would be a late fall winter release of Vana'diel, Wings of the Goddess, of 2010 thereabouts. Again, I'm not familiar with the scope. Is that more of a TV show or cinema scope?
Okay, so imagine a Final Fantasy game, like a normal Final Fantasy game, then quadruple its size by 4. That's Wings of the Goddess. It is.
Okay. So maybe it would just be a long movie then.
No, this is like a trilogy. This is Lord of the Rings.
Okay. All right. Well, in my universe, it would be condensed into a singular thing, be it a TV movie or a regular movie. Maybe it would be doing massive disservice to it. But because I have next to zero familiarity, I can't elucidate.
You are a professional screenwriter.
What makes you think that?
Because you're like, I have no familiarity with this, and I'm going to like drastically reduce it and not be faithful to the source material. You're ready for the industry, bud.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay,
you are
maybe
ready.
I should take a stab at adapting with something. Maybe I should try it. So yeah, okay. Well, if you want to do a separate thing about that, then maybe someday. But like as of right now, I only have it as a footnote because again, my lack of familiarity. But yeah, next would be Materia Crisis Core. This would be a spring of 2011. This would be a 10-episode TV show, and it would be just as fun and polarizing as the real game. You would have Genesis. You wouldn't have Crisis Core without Genesis. as however that may feel to whomever and however the fan base would react the same way how they do. And yeah, over the course of 10 episodes, it would be focused on Zack. And of course, I should mention that this would be around the time when we start entering, I suppose, the second. There haven't really been phases up to this point, but since this is a prequel to the Final Fantasy, you'd obviously have to have different actors for Zack, Sephiroth, and Cloud. And this would be the start of, in this parallel universe, of a planned crisis. I think it would just be called Crisis, just a crisis arc of the Final Fantasy, which would just basically be like the X-Men First Class of the thing. where it's like a prequel slash reboot of the franchise, and because the success of Crisis Core, it would be mixed at best. The ultimate goal of rebooting Crisis and having basically a remake of Final Fantasy VII at this point, or materia in this universe, wouldn't really get off the ground because there wouldn't be enough interest behind it. There wouldn't be enough money behind it. No, not money. There's enough money to make all this stuff, so money's not really a question. It's just a matter of like whether a creative director wants to spend so much time retelling the events of. But this would be a planned retelling of the Final Fantasy VII materia arc, where like as much creative license can be taken. It doesn't have to be beat for the original, and it doesn't have to quite be like a stealth sequel like the remake was in our world. It would just basically be you take all the setting, the characters, and you could just basically rearrange it and retell it any way you want. But of course, that doesn't happen. So what we get is Crisis Core, the 10-episode TV show detailing the entirety of the game.
Nice, and then you've got another 11. For someone who doesn't know anything about 11, you stuck it on this list a bunch of times. Like, I think I have to.
Right, because I saw this as more like, if we're going to try to reach for real world parallels, kind of like the Arrowverse of the Final Fantasy, where like it's a bit jankier than the rest of the properties, but there's enough of a faithful following, kind of like in real life. Like there's enough faithful Final Fantasy 11 players to keep the game going. So logic would dictate there's enough faithful people who follow the Vana'diel arcs to tune in and chime into these properties.
I think that's a really good take. I think that's a very fair comparison, and it hurts my soul thinking that Final Fantasy XI is the Arrowverse of Final Fantasy, but also it's kind of true, so I accept it.
So yeah, Vana'diel, the Crystalline Prophecy would be a spring 2012 release. Again, not familiar with the scope. Is that like, does that need to be a trilogy too?
No, that's like you could do that in a half hour.
Oh, so that could just be a TV special. Then.
Yeah, that could be that's an OVA, yeah. Man.
Oh, that's just an OVA.
Yeah, right. Like you can get it. You can like you're gonna be watching that and be like, oh man, was that Dead Zone length? Yeah, that was Dead Zone length.
All right. Oh, fantastic! All right, so after that OVA, then moving on, we'd have another spring 2012 release, TV show, 10-episode TV show, Chronicles: The After Years, which would unsurprisingly mainly follow the events of Final Fantasy IV: The After Years, which admittedly I never played. The premise seemed interesting enough. The addition of like new characters and the return of the old 4 gang was interesting enough, but I think what you could do that's fun, maybe closer to the end, however this may fit in, have live action versions of some of the characters from 6 or Balance and Ruin, and then the actual 3 and 5 make a cameo appearance in the course of the show, just to be like, hey, you've only seen this in cartoon form up until this point.
I lost you there for a second.
After years, how far off my rocker am I?
I lost you there for like the last like minute. So if you want to just repeat what you were saying.
Sure. So just a quick recap. Chronicles: The After Years would unsurprisingly basically be the main retelling of Final Fantasy IV: The After Years, with all the main plot points, beats, and everything. But I think it would be fun to basically have appearances of some of the characters, the fun characters from like 6, 5, and 3, make cameo appearances in live action in the After Years as their first appearance on screen, and then they're just gone. They show up, they do a thing, their purpose is fulfilled, and they disappear, and you never see them again in this show.
You could definitely get away with that. You could definitely get away with that with the way that the end game of the After Years is. That works.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so you'd see like Terra for the first time. You'd see Celis for the first time. Bartz, Ferris, Refia. I don't know. These are the people that like stuck out in my brain as like, these are like, at least I know how you feel about Terra, but these are characters that are at least supposed to be important, and so therefore in this world there would be enough. If it's a story only media, I feel there would be enough opportunities to create these characters to be more interesting and more fleshed out. So in this world, Terra would be like the Scarlet Witch, I suppose, of the Final Fantasy universe. To
I
where
mean,
like
she already kind of
people
is.
give
Starts off with a lot of premise,
right,
and then they just drop the ball on her arc. Ba-boom!
yeah, all right, well, yeah. So that's what I have as far as, and then of course at the end it'd be revealed that all the worlds are connected, and that would be open the door to the summer release of the next 8-episode TV show, Dissidia, which would be the first crossover. Again, as someone who never actually played Dissidia either, because the idea of it didn't really appeal to me in terms of a game wise, but from a story perspective, it does. You bring back not all, but like all the main people from the previous properties. You bring back Cloud, you bring back Squall, you bring back Tidus, you bring back does Vaughn? No, Vaughn doesn't make an appearance in the first Dissidia. You bring back basically I suppose a similar roster, but no Onion Knight, no Warrior of Light. You could be more creative with the roster of who they are, and in terms of like what the story would actually be, I saw something more akin to like what X-Men did with Days of Future Past, in a way, to where you have these team ups and they do whatever. They get pulled from their, because up to this point, the universe is not shared. These are all their own properties, their
Mm-hmm.
own stories, their own worlds, and for the first time, you yank them into a combined shared experiment to be like, and it would come off as action figures smashing against each other mostly,
Right.
because
That's
you have
basically
so
what.
many people in a room, you can't.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
that's
basically what
what
it
it
is.
is.
That's why I
Like,
first.
are you familiar with the Secret
And
Wars, the Marvel comic?
I have a cursory familiarity with it.
That's
Yes.
basically what Dissidia is. It's just like all heroes,
Okay.
all good guys, action figure smash is what it is. And it's interesting. You and I have an opposite perspective on Dissidia, where you're
Mm-hmm.
interested in it from like a story perspective, and I'm more interested in
Mm-hmm.
Dissidia from the gameplay perspective because like the Final Fantasy has so many of those action figure smash games, and just like I don't find
Mm-hmm.
the overall narratives to be good. Like you get some interesting character interactions and some character beats, but like the stories
Mm-hmm.
themselves, like the overarching narrative tends to suck in those games. But like the individual,
Okay.
like, oh, it's fun to see these characters interact and how they bounce off each other, that's fun. But I love fighting games. So I'm just like, oh, hell yeah, cool fighting game. I'm down for this.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So you could see like and at first you see the first time where Cloud might face up against Squall. In a sword battle until they realize, hey, we're not enemies. Oh, and this would make the first live action appearance of Zidane. You'd find somebody you could cast and basically be a live action Zidane, throw him into the fray, and yeah. But otherwise, you'd bring back the live action Terra that was introduced in the Chronicles After Years. You'd bring in the live action Bartz that was introduced in the Chronicles live action After Years. Maybe Raffia, because I don't know anything about Onion Knight. I never played the original Japanese 3. And plus, and I guess I'm putting too much stock behind Raffia because all 4 of the characters in 3 are just as semi-blank slate, but I felt like she had the most potential creatively to perhaps be a fleshed out character. Luneth, Ark, and Ingus all kind of are just really close to the archetype chest. I could be misinterpreting it, but I just don't see them being as interesting in a piece of media like this. But yeah, that's over the course of 8 episodes. It would just basically be an opportunity for heroes to fight against either both each other and greater scope villains in a Secret Wars type of setup, and then at the end they just go back to their respective worlds and move on. Any thoughts? Because again, I'm kind of grasping at straws here.
I mean, it's Secret Wars, so I think the trick with this, I think they're, the advantage of my universe is that it was building up towards like some kind of consistency, like building towards like the Avengers Endgame. Dissidia is really more like a, it's an Avengers style event, if you're bringing all these characters together. So I don't know if a TV show is the best way to do it, even if you're getting like live
Okay.
action versions of all of them for the first time. But because
Mhm.
it's more like a Fox haphazard, we just like didn't have a plan. This is just what's there. I could
Mhm.
see it being like, how the Arrowverse did that giant, Crisis on Infinite Earth crossover thing. I think that's kind of where this would
Mhm.
land, and I think it would be
Okay.
a fun time. But yeah, you could definitely do it. Um, as far as the archetype characters from three, I think they all kind of have equal amount of ability to be fleshed out. Um, so I don't see Reppy as being that much stronger than the others. I think they all have a good, strong foundation. It's just they didn't add enough character beats throughout three to like make it really land. But I think they're all
Mhm.
like pretty strong foundationally. So I like all of them.
All right. Yeah, very cool. Oh yeah. So then, moving on. Then I had another Vonadil property, a Vision of Abyssia, for a winter of 2013 release. Um, Again, no familiarity. Is that more of akin to a show, a movie, a TV movie?
That
What,
is
what would you say?
that one's tricky because that one is mostly fighting and it's kind of lighter on stories.
Okay.
So
Okay.
man, that one's just weird. I would just say skip that one and do like Mughal Coup d'etat or Shantoto Ascension instead.
Or Wings of the Goddess Part Two?
Yeah, or you could do Wings of the Goddess Part Two because, I mean, Wings of the Goddess is huge. I can't
Mm-hmm.
undersell how big Wings of the Goddess is. Like if that was a standalone FF
Mm-hmm.
game, it'd be the biggest
Mm-hmm.
game in the main series. Just that. If you're kind of like each 11 expansion is like a game, and
Mm-hmm.
do that same for 14. So like, yes, 14 as a whole is bigger than Wings of the Goddess, but Wings of the
Mm-hmm.
Goddess is again the size of 4 Final Fantasy games. It's just massive.
Okay. Well, then the next spring of 2013 release would be the start of, obviously, enough the Final Fantasy 13. I would see it as a TV show, and I would call it Awakening, Final Fantasy Awakening. And it would tell, over the course of 13 episodes, the main beats of the story of Final Fantasy 13. Not that I couldn't see 13 done as a movie, I just think there's a lot of ground to cover, and you'd have to make a lot of changes, which may not be bad. You might get a better villain out of the deal. Um, but if we're going to keep it as faithful and intact as the original, I see it over the course of like a 13 episode series. What do you say?
Uh, I think that's the trick is like given how fantastical 13's world is. Like when I think of
Mm-hmm.
13, one of the big things I think about is like how pretty it looks and how
Mm-hmm.
they blew all their money on the like special effects budget and didn't have room for gameplay or like
Mm-hmm.
world exploration. And so my mind thinks, how do you take the one that is known for being like we blew all our money on special effects as a TV show? So I have trouble reconciling that. And because I think you could tell 13 like as a movie pretty tightly. I think he could do it.
Okay,
I think you could trim that
sure.
and make that a movie. I don't think a TV show would work for that necessarily, just because so much of it is
Okay.
like, look how pretty our sets are. So I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
sci-fi
Yeah,
epic.
like an Avatar.
Yeah, I'm thinking, yeah, like an Avatar. Like, look how
Like
pretty this
a
is.
very,
I
very
think,
pretty game. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. All right. Yeah, for sure. All right. For fall of 2013, it would be the Final Fantasy 14 base game adaptation. I'd call it Final Fantasy Rapture. And again, I never touched the online ones. I never played 14 either. Um, so my familiarity is entirely through recaps and basically people explaining. And I've tried watching a lot of the cutscenes and stuff from these games, and they're just so boring. It's unfortunate. I just find them extremely boring. So, but I think that the idea behind the base game, the whole mythology with the primals and Gaius and the Dalamud, I think it's called, the big old red
yeah.
thing in the sky, like that would be like the greatest ending to a movie of all time. But in real life, the movie would flop. People would hate it because it would be like it would be like Rebel Moon, like it would be like a Zack Snyder type of affair where it's like visually impressive. The costumes are great. There's a lot of kick-ass action scenes, but like the story moves like mud. Uh, so oddly enough, it would fail just like it did in the real world, but it would fail spectacularly because it would create like the greatest ending to a film of all time. So much so that it would be reused for the beginning of the reboot of the same thing, which would obviously Realm Reborn. But the main character would be the main character they have on the box, the Meteor Survivor. You could give him a name. I don't have one offhand. The Rabtoons adaptations keep calling him Herbert because he's a here human type thing. So you could go with Herbert, just call him Meteor. Or, I don't know. But it would be like following him, meeting up with I know it's got a 3-path thing. It would just go to Ul'dah, meeting up with Thancred first off, and then Papalimo and Ida and Ishtola would all pop in later on as supporting characters. Minfilia would be the head of the Scions. And I think it would pretty much write itself as like, but unfortunately, it would sort of play out like imagine. Do you ever see X-Men Dark Phoenix? Imagine like a 3.5 hour cut of X-Men Dark Phoenix. It would be like that dreadful.
Okay, so you are mixing a little bit of a Realm Reborn with 14 1.0. They are different
Am
stories.
I?
Yeah, but
Okay.
I understand you're wanting to make this bad, so I do understand like you want to make Dark Phoenix. I believe you can do it. I believe somehow you can make 14 1.0 into something bad. Don't worry, I have faith in you. I will say this: if you've tried watching 14 1.0 cutscenes and then a Realm Reborn is a big step up from 1.0, which is really boring. It's really really boring. It's rough. And a Realm Reborn isn't even that great. It's just that 1.0 is just like, yeah, this just failed on every level.
hmm Yeah. So yeah, you're about at the halfway point of all this stuff. Did you want me to like speed up somehow, or because if you're truly interested in my takes and ideas of this universe, I unfortunately have to spend a certain amount of time with them. But
You know,
it's up to you. I mean,
I think we can still go through it. I mean, what? We're more than halfway through. Or no, we are exactly
yeah, I
halfway
think
through. I think some of these we're going to be you're not going to have as much to say, I think, because we're going to be like
okay.
another 14 one. Here's another 14 one. So I think like they're not all of these are going to be equal in length. So yeah, let's keep going and let's aim for a half hour more and then see where we're at.
Sure, sure. I'll do my best. And thanks to everyone in chat for hanging in there. Um,
No, this
but
this is a good time. So
yeah,
let's see
yeah.
what
So
is
yeah, just
next.
really quick.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, what's up? No, go ahead.
No, I was looking at since I was going to talk about the next one on the list, but if you had something to say, I don't want to cut you off in case you're leading into something.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll just I've spent a lot of time, basically repeating myself. So I'll try to be quick with this one. Next would be Dissidia Duodecim. Again, another one I haven't played, but the significance of this one would be the introduction of Shintaro into the Dissidia Secret Wars framework, the introduction of Vaughn into the Secret Wars framework, and it would be I guess more along the lines of a Days of Future Past, where you have the original, I call them the legacy people of everyone we just talked about, and it would introduce the planned crisis arc people. So you'd have original Cloud, and then you'd have the Cloud that was in Crisis Core, but now he's a little older, and he would make an appearance, and it would be like the moment where a whole new universe is being referenced. The fact that the prequel slash spinoff, what have you, is in fact a whole different timeline of the events. And so I only just had like Crisis Cloud. You could make alternate Squall, but we didn't spend enough time with like the Squall and the Tidus, I don't think, as much as we did with the 7 people. So you'd have like Crisis Cloud and Crisis Sephiroth making an appearance with the OG Cloud and OG Sephiroth. How do you feel about that kind of a vibe?
I think that would work. I don't see any issue with that. I think that would work just fine.
Cool. So yeah, that would just basically just be an excuse to have a second Dissidia team up thing, and then introduce the fact that, oh crap, there's a whole other uh, universe that's supposed to be planned, but it doesn't end up coming into fruition for reasons. The next property would be the Final Fantasy II Awakening 2. That's as it existed. If we're going to do the same treatment as we did with the original Final Fantasy 13, you can make that into a movie too. I think a lot of it is just messy. Again, I never actually played it myself. It didn't appeal to me, but watching it in videos, my mind was already like, okay, you can cut this, you can move this, you can give Noel Christ more to do, you can do less with the Yule, you can, like I think you could give that treatment to Final Fantasy 13 too, as Awakening 2, and have it be like the second installment with Sarah dying at the end, as it does in the real world, and having Lightning being the guardian of Etro or whatever she is. I think it would just basically be another very pretty movie to watch, but it would be semi-incoherent even with all the fixes and edits. So with that, then another Vana'diel, Seekers of Adullin. Again, I'm not going to say too much about it because I have no familiarity. Then you'd have the cinematic Realm Reborn. This would be like the first successful movie in the Rapture franchise. It would basically be just the retelling of the main beats of the Realm Reborn. And that would open it up to the Rapture, the Seventh Astral Era, which would be a series of 5 special presentations that would cover the post-game stuff, or some of the stuff that wasn't touched upon in the Realm Reborn film, that could be told over the course of like 5 relatively like hour and 20-minute episodes over the course of a few months, just basically to bridge the gap between the next Rapture film, which would be Heavensward. Then you'd have Awakening Lightning Returns. You could make that a movie too, because I feel like that's like the Dragon Ball GT of the Final Fantasy 13 thing. I thought like turning Hope into a boy again was kind of a weird move. So that would be one where you can play around with and have some fun with. And again, at the end, it would have the universe. They'd kill Bunavelza, and then it would. But instead of it being our world, it would be the bridge into the opening of the world where Type 0 and 13 take place, and allegedly where Crisis could take place, but never did. So that's what I had in mind for that. And then moving on would be the Type 0. I would have that be like a TV show, because there's just like way too many characters to have them all in a film and grant them enough weight to have them matter. You would probably tell it over the course of like 3 seasons, kind of a similar like like a high school thing, what they do. But that would be my plan for Type 0.
I'd watch that.
Then
I'd watch that.
You'd watch it? Cool. Sweet. Yeah, give them more to do, give them more purpose. Then Rhapsodies of Vana'diel. That sounded like it would be closing the gaps of everyone who followed the Vana'diel arcs up to this point, in a way that I think the real world games did, and that could be a movie or show. Again, don't really know, but I feel that would fulfill the same purpose. Then we get to Rapture Heavensward, which would be like the Infinity Wars of the or Endgame of the not in terms of like story importance, but in terms of like grossing. It would be like this full cut would be like this 4-hour film of the scope of Heavensward, and it would be like wildly successful. Like everyone in the community just loved it because it's apparently the best one at that point in time. And it would give the Rapture, it would redeem from the first awful installment. And then coming after that would be the same thing that happened with the Seventh Astral Era. You'd have Dragon Song, another like 5 special presentations told over the course of a few months to cover some post-game content, focusing like the Dragon Song War and some of the other beats that were missed in the surprisingly long Heavensward film, but still given some special attention. Then I would have Kingsglaive, but again, live action, not CG. You could pretty much just yank it just how it was, real life, in our world, and then just have it told live action in that way.
Is Sean Bean still King Regis?
He sure can be. He can be. If Sean Bean exists in this world, again, if this is a world where Hamilton survived, I figured everybody born after 1805 wouldn't be the same people. So, but sure, a Sean Bean XP.
In this world, Ronald Reagan is a radical communist.
Ronald Reagan wasn't even born. Okay, here's one. The World of Final Fantasy. This would be drastically different from the real world thing that we got, which is basically Final Fantasy Pokemon, plus stacking, in my experience. I didn't dislike it, but I didn't care for the whole chibi monsters on top of your head aspect. I did not like Tama's dialect. I didn't like any of that. So it would basically just be Rain and Lon exploring these worlds. But it would basically be an opportunity to visit the worlds that were planned for the Crisis reboot, but never came to fruition. So instead, they just get like an episode where you get to experience like an adventure here and there. It would be live action. It would be a show over the course of maybe a season or two, depending on how successful it was. So you'd have the live action Crisis Cloud. You'd have the live action Terra and Celis, maybe. I don't know.
So it's interesting.
But
The parts of
moving
World
on
of
then,
Final Fantasy you don't like are the same parts my wife doesn't like, and I think those parts are awesome.
yeah, I can't stand it. But I understand from a game perspective, it's cute, it's fun. You got like Cactuar as the train conductor, Thornberry running the battle arena. Again, very cute from a game perspective, but not something I'd really want to watch.
Oh no! So for me, like all like the annoying mascot characters, like I live for that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, look, I'm not going to say that
Okay.
Choo Choo is the best part of Xenogears. That'd be a ridiculous thing to say. All right, let's move on.
That would be Big Joe. That would be Big Joe. No. Then you'd have Final Fantasy Brotherhood, which would just basically be Final Fantasy 15. You can try to condense it into a film, but with the whole road trip aspect of the thing over the course, it would almost have to be a TV show. Funny we mentioned this because this would be. There was a planned Final Fantasy Versus, which would be the Versus 13, where they had it like they were in pre-production. They filmed like a bunch of key scenes. They went all out on the trailers. This would have been like 5 years before
This is the Snyder Cut. This will be Justice League, and then the Snyder Cut comes out later during the pandemic on HBO Max.
Well, the thing is, in this universe, Versus would never come to be. Like it like for whatever reasons, people just kept dropping off the project to where, and then eventually the actors who played Noctis and the crew all aged out. So then, when it became time for a different director to pick up and tell the story, you'd have to get a new Noctis and a new Ignis, Gladio, all them. You could keep the same Arden if Arden is part of the Versus 13. I don't remember. But the fun part is that when you go to the point later on, when they're all adults, you'd have the original actors that were cast as the Noctis and all them in Versus make an appearance as the older versions of the Noctis and crew that were there throughout the entirety of the thing, as a way to sort of like send them off and give them their fair due, because their movie unfortunately didn't get made, or show didn't get made. Then you got the adaptation of Stormblood, one I didn't play. Next I would have Fortress the Zodiac Age. Now I know that in the real world, the Zodiac Age is just basically the port of the international version of 12, and upgraded with graphics and stuff. But in this universe, it would be the sequel of sorts to the Fortress Final Fantasy 12 analog.
So you mean Revenant
media
Wings?
that we got. It would have the central core plot of Revenant Wings with like Vaughn and Penalo as their own pilots. But again, I never played Revenant Wings, and it didn't really. The rest of the whole bird people thing didn't really sound all that fantastic and interesting. So
sounds like someone who never enjoyed Star Ocean 1.
See what?
Sounds like someone who never enjoyed Star Ocean 1.
Never played it.
Oh, the bird people in that are great.
But okay, cool. But it would have the core aspects of Revenant Wings, but it would introduce. It would have characters from Tactics Advanced and Tactics A2. You'd have Luce and Marsh make an appearance in there. It would basically be a whole new narrative, but using Revenant Wings, the premise of Revenant Wings as a framework, and then it would turn out that Balthier survived at the very end, and he'd come back, and it would be like a woo, crowd would cheer, and it would probably just be a film. So yeah, it would be a whole thing that would tie back to the abandoned Crisis cinematic properties that we never got. And I'm not entirely positive how yet, because I didn't write these, but that's what I have envisioning. Then Rapture, Rebuilding Two Nations, which would be the same thing, 5 episodes, bridging the gap after Stormblood into Shadowbringers of some more fun stuff. Then Then Dissidia NT, which would be the final Dissidia thing, which would feature all new actors as their respective people. So basically, the people that were supposed to be in the whole Crisis timeline properties would make an appearance in Dissidia and do the same crap that they did in Duodecim in the original Dissidia. Because again, I don't know the story of NT. Then you'd get Shadowbringers, and then you'd get Rapture Requiem, same deal, 5 episodes detailing post-game content, post-movie content, or some other stuff that was left out. And then you get to the next, I suppose, phase here. So I suppose this whole Crisis thing and Fabula Nova Crystallis are kind of like mishmashed to create kind of a thing that like started to do a thing, but never actually got off the ground. But you got a bunch of cool, pretty-looking properties out of the deal, minus the whole Rapture and Vana'diel stuff, which is their own tightly knit properties. Then you'd have Materia Remake, which would be you could. We're coming up to the point where it's like 2023 or so, where like TV shows at this point, in my opinion, are like on the same caliber, if not better, than movies in terms of production. So you could make a Final Fantasy VII remake or Materia remake into a premium TV show.
Amazon has bought the
no
rights to it, and instead they're making it a TV show instead of a trilogy. Wait, what?
Well, you just get the remake game to the point where you get the crazy Kingdom Hearts ending with the alternate Zack walking back, and yeah, it would be polarizing, but also popular because Sephiroth is introduced way too early. But of course, from
You're cutting out there. I'm gonna wave my hand so you notice, and then let you know that you are cutting out, and to please repeat what you just said.
I can't hear you. I couldn't hear you at all.
Can you hear me now? Because I was telling you that you cut out, and you should repeat what you just said. That's what the hand waving was for.
What did you last hear?
Just rewind yourself back, go back to the start of what were we on?
Remake?
We were on Remake, and we were talking about it being a TV show and the quality of the TV show. Then made a joke about Amazon, and then after my Amazon joke, maybe continue.
Okay, sure. So yeah, you'd have the TV show, and you'd have it basically play out how it does in the real world, where Sephiroth is introduced way too early, but in a grand scope, that makes sense because you don't need retread of the original events of the OG game that told it just fine. So the stealth sequel aspect is clever and cool and fun. Even with the Aerith swatting at ghosts, that's even as stupid as it looks, it has to be there because Nomura's going for something. And you'd have the crazy Kingdom Hearts ending, which people would be like, all right, it's the thing. And then you'd have like the two Zacks walking back together, the alternate one, they never actually see each other. Yeah, so you basically take all the main plots of the remake, turn that into a TV show, and Bob's your uncle.
Bob is your libertarian uncle.
Poor Bob. So then the final Vana'diel property, the Voracious Resurgence, which would be kind of like the epilogue, I suppose, I know it's still ongoing, but in this world,
oh no, it's done.
It would be the last one they make. Okay, cool. They close it out, however they do, and whoever's like Arrowverse, whoever followed it faithfully, or unlike the Arrowverse, people probably like the Voracious Resurgence. But yeah, that would be the next thing. And then Materia Integrate would just be the 2 episodes just telling Yuffie's part of the story. Yuffie and Sonon doing the thing, reintroducing actually new versions of Weiss and Nero at the very end, because as they made an appearance in Dirge of Cerberus, you got all new actors playing these people, the Crisis actors and the Fabula Nova Crystallis actors that were played in the Final Fantasy VII crew.
You want to be very careful when you talk about Crisis actors on the internet.
Okay. Fine. Well,
you're like, I'm not touching that joke.
Two... No, I am not. The Phase 2 people, the Phase 2 people that were supposed to have their own Final Fantasy VII Materia reboots, but never happened. They wouldn't appear. You have a whole third group, tertiary group of people playing Cloud, Barrett, Tifa, Yuffie, all them, and so that would be that. It would just be 2 episodes of the events of Yuffie within the context of remake. Then you'd have Materia the First Soldier. which again is, from my recollection, just a mobile fighting game, and it got canceled.
Yeah, so
In this
you'd
world, it would
have it be
be
like
two.
a 16 episode series, but actually get canceled midway through and only gets like 5 episodes.
Well, no, I would actually give it 2 full seasons because I think there's actually some cool stories to tell. The first season would obviously deal with Glenn and that whole arc in the Wutai War, with young Sephiroth and all that. The stuff that was repurposed, I think, for the Ever Crisis Materia Gacha game. That whole arc would be repurposed into a first season. And people were going to hope for a Fargo kind of approach, like not an anthology because it's all the same universe. But season 1 would be the Wutai War. I think it takes place in the Wutai War, doesn't it? Or right before
I
it?
believe so. I haven't bothered diving into it because I'm gonna be honest, I don't like most of the compilation stuff. I'm just like, you know what, I'm good. Remake and Rebirth
Fair,
seem
fair,
cool,
fair.
and Ever Crisis is probably okay, but like, man, I'm busy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of other stuff to check out.
That's fair. But in this parallel timeline, you'd have the first season dedicated to young Sephiroth, Glenn, and the Wutai War right before leading up to it. And then I think with season 2, you jump back a bit to the foundings of the country, or the foundings of Midgar, where you focus more on President Shinra, because that's a character I felt that didn't really get a lot of time. And that was a character, again, when I was first playing the game, I'm kind of like, I want to know more, because I thought he was going to be the villain. Well, no, I'm not going to be so glib. I knew Sephiroth was going to be like the greater scope villain, but for at least this part of the game, that I felt President Shinra was supposed to be more important than he was. And so to get more information on how he and his first original Shinra crew back in GEAL's 1977, whatever, and basically up to Hojo and Gast finding Genova, doing the stuff. That whole arc from like the first like 7 or so years of the company, I think that could be told in the season 2, and then it would get canceled because I guess not enough people gave a crap about President Shinra's story arc. I don't know. Little Rufus walking around, you see his wife. I don't know. Feel free to stop me. But yeah, next you have Rat.
Sorry, just the way you said that was like it was very like Ben Stiller-esque, like the complete like dry humor of it just really got to me.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to cover a lot of stuff here, and I don't want to waste everyone's too much time. So, then next we'd have the Rapture, the Endwalker, which would be up to this point the final film in the Rapture franchise, whatever that may be. However, that manifested, I didn't spend a lot of time because, again, no familiarity. Emmett Selge at this point is a villain. I forget when he was introduced. I think Shadowbringers. But it would basically be a big old grand send off of the Rapture part of that arc, and a big payoff for anyone that tuned into it.
Oh, and for reference, as we're talking about 11 and 14 and stuff you don't have as much familiarity with, and I haven't played all of 14, but like I know like plot beats for the expansions after what I played. Basically, Rhapsodies of Vana'diel and Endwalker are both the Avengers Endgame of those universes. And then, like, Dawn Trail and Voracious Resurgence are like weird, like Phase 4, like She-Hulk Attorney at Law kind of properties where like they're actually not bad, but they're so different from like the grand epicness you just received where you're just like, what is this? But like me, who's like, all right, well, as long as it's good, I can just chill with it. That's just so you know what like tone wise you're getting. It's like you followed Endgame with She-Hulk.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Well, so you got the Endwalker, and then the next thing here. Again, at this point, this is the last. Wait. Well, the timelines I figured don't really matter since I haven't given you a date in some time. So, but as of this point, you got Stranger of Paradise, which I think could be the retelling of the first game. But again, since we didn't get a telling of the first official game in the cinematic franchise universe thingy, it would be different from
directed by Zack Snyder.
I did. Sure. But like Zack Snyder, like doing okay. But like, I don't mean to knock on Zack. I don't hate his movies. It's just they have a je ne sais quoi to them that your mileage may vary.
That Stranger Paradise would also have
for the story he's telling. I can't hear you at all.
I said that Stranger Paradise would also have. It would have that je ne sais quoi to it. And what was it? Limp Bizkit would have a huge comeback when this movie came out, and it would have a #1 album. and it'd be awkward for everybody.
Yeah, but it would be different because I watched the cutscene again. Not a game I played because I'm not a fan of a lot of action RPGs. I played my share of them. I love Dragon Age, obviously. But well, not obviously. We never mentioned it. But it would be different. Well, but I figured it would time to. Well, I mentioned it. I figured I'd show you my. If we can see it. Hell, the
I will be able
I'm
to
not good
see
with
it in
cameras.
the replay because of the way I'm monitoring like the video feed. I can't quite see it, but I see there's a tattoo of some sort there.
There is. I'm trying to get it in the frame, and I'm not very good at this. But you can sort of see the outlines of Tonberry holding Cloud's Buster Sword.
Uh-huh.
Maybe.
I mean, I believe you.
And
I'm
then
not
there's the
going to be able to
Dragon Age
see it
logo.
until I check out the replay. But for the folks at home, actually, wait,
Yeah.
maybe it'll show up
Yeah.
on this over here. I'll see it like a few seconds later. I'm going to monitor closely.
All right. Sure, go ahead.
No, I mean you can keep talking. I'll let you know if I see it.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. So anyway, watching the cutscenes of Stranger of Paradise on YouTube, I was like, this is kind of stupid. Because I didn't like the whole, they don't have their memory because of the Luthenians and the memory eggs, and I don't know anything about that. But, like, the character would be introduced as Jack Garland from the get-go. He would know he's Jack Garland. Maybe you give better names to the rest of his characters. I don't know. But it would be basically, you take these modern people from the same. I told you I'd bring back Spirits Within. It would be the same people from that world of Spirits Within, but like before the events of Spirits Within. So let's say Spirits Within, I think, takes place in like 2065 AD on Earth. Jack Garland would be from like 2030 Earth, and he would be sent to the world of Concordia with other people, basically kind of like Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes, where he gets sent into a world that's not that Concordia is like Earth in thousands of years in the future, but in terms of like that scope of storytelling, where he gets into some hijinks. He meets Astos, the whole deal with the four fiends. You could abridge that or whatnot, and it turns out at the end Garland becomes Chaos. But since we didn't get a cinematic rendition of the first game, that would come off as a twist because no one knew that up to this point.
Okay.
So it'd basically be like
if this is Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes, does this mean this is by far the best film we've talked about so far?
It would be. It's unique. It's unique, and it could have the thing where he lands back on Earth and there's the General Thade is the Lincoln statue. They would be just as crazy. Where like the other four members of the party, it's like you're not one of the warriors of light. You're actually going to be Chaos. Like it would make just as much sense because the story wouldn't really lead it to go that way, but it has to go that way to make any sense and be better than what we got as a real game. So the next property after that, unless you have something to add to the Strangers of Paradise thing that I mentioned.
No, just dumb jokes.
Yeah. Dumb jokes, Limp Bizkit, iPods, the Precision F Strike, F-bomb. You have a Rapture Newfound Adventure, which would be like in my brain, the She-Hulks, the fun stuff of the Rapture timeline, Final Fantasy XIV timeline, told over 5 episodes. There's really no need to it was just basically an excuse to see people do cool and fun things, whatever those things may be in the course of that story.
The fun stuff of the Rapture
adventures.
timeline, like Trump's NFT commercials.
Yeah. So then, another new, quote unquote, new property, Crisis Core Reunion. Now, of course, in the real world, it's just a reskin report of the original game with, I think, a slightly different cutscene to better match the events of the remake. But in this game, it would be a sequel TV series to the Crisis Core that would feature that actor who played Zack in the second phase of Crisis Core. That actor of Zack would come back, and then you'd have another Zack who wouldn't be the Zack of the. Well, the Zack of the remake would make a cameo appearance, but then you'd have like that alternate Zack that was in the remake interacting with the Zack of the original Crisis Core.
Now, hear me out. You could just cast Paul Rudd. He doesn't age.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get serious on casting, the person
Paul Rudd
as
Zack. I mean, I would buy it. I think everyone would buy Paul Rudd as Zack.
Yeah, well, Yeah, fine. We can have Paul Rudd as that Zack, and then like Ben Barnes as the other Zack. I don't know.
No, the
But
same Zack. He doesn't age. You just like put a little bit of makeup on him. He's the same Zack.
that's fair.
I mean, you look at like Chris Evans in the new Deadpool movie. He looks basic. He doesn't look that much different from when he did the old Fox Fantastic Four movies like 20
Fantastic
years ago.
Fours.
Like he still looks pretty young. So yeah, no, Paul Rudd.
So Paul Rudd as Zack Fair would, and this would bring back Genesis, because I don't know if you ever heard of this. There was a fan movie made based out of the Crisis Core called Project M.
I have not heard of this.
Follows the adventures. Okay, so yeah, it takes a lot. They introduced a new character. Her name's Emily Newgray. She's a soldier second class, and so I think she would be like she would be like a secondary or tertiary character who would have to deal with the hijinks of the two different Paul Rudd Zack Fairs. But she also is she's second class soldier. She was there when she knew Zack and Cloud back at the Shinra complex when they were training. And it would be revealed that in this version of the timeline, Nibelheim was set on fire by Genesis, as it detailed in Project M. Genesis was the cause of that, and Sephiroth was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. So it would give an opportunity for any fanboys of Sephiroth to pursue a Draco and leather pants type of fantasy, and have him be a bit not quite so evil, because we got enough, evil Sephiroth.
So I know this casting won't happen, but I'm just gonna put out there's like what I want to be. Genesis in the original Crisis Core, Peter Gabriel. Genesis in Crisis Core Reunion, Phil Collins. And if we ever,
where's
yeah,
we got Ray Wilson.
I
get a Ray Wilson.
Dare to dream if we get a third version. Yes, dare to dream. Look, I'm not going to say that Congo is the best Genesis song, because that would be. All right, so moving on.
Yeah, no, I get it. Then you'd have the Final Fantasy 16. That would be a TV show. It would just be called Mythos, Final Fantasy Mythos. Clive. This would be the. You could even have Ralph Ineson as Sid Telemon. I think he'd kill. It's his voice, but you'd also have him. And basically, all the main beats and plot points of Mythos across 3 seasons. Need I say more?
No, I think you're good.
Yeah, just a few more properties, and I'll let you all go. But the next one, I have Ever Crisis Materia. Now, Ever Crisis would be different in this cinematic universe, because it would be the animated telling of the Crisis story that didn't get told during the Phase 2 of the story. So you'd have, like, they were trying to make a reboot of Final Fantasy VII Materia, and then eventually probably get into Successor and Spira, if it did well enough, but never happened. This Ever Crisis would be like the X-Men 97. But instead of a continuation of the original series, it would be the animated telling of the events of, let's say, the Midgar portion of Final Fantasy VII, Season 1, 10 episodes. But this would contain elements of Before Crisis, the mobile game. So instead of having Shinra being the main villain as it was in the OG and the remake, you'd have more of a focus on Fujito. Now, I don't know how much familiarity you have with Fujito, and I probably have even less, but in my brain, I created him as kind of like the Magneto of this world, where he's fighting for the planet in his own, weird way, but he's also obsessed with Hojo's scientific stuff. He's got his people, Elf and Shears. I think her name's Elf. Whatever. So you'd have him basically be a new antagonist, and so the people, the party up to that point in the game of 7 would have to deal with Fujito, and instead of dealing with how things went down in the original 2 properties. And that would be Season 1. And then if this did well, you'd get Ever Crisis Successor, Ever Crisis Spira, Ever Crisis Materia Season 2, and so on and so forth. And then the last 2 are self-explanatory. Materia Rebirth would be the events of Rebirth told across a series of TV shows with an equally unsatisfying ending. And then you'd have Rapture Dawn Trail, which would be the restart. Well, not a reboot, but like the continuation of the Rapture. Final Fantasy XIV people put like a new adventure with a whole new set of whatever happens in Dawn Trail, but you condense that into a movie, and you start like a new adventure with the same old people or some new people. You catch my drift, and that's what I have up to this point.
You you cut out there a little bit. I think you meant to say that Rebirth will have a really awesome ending that's like super cool. But otherwise, yeah, great list, man.
Thank you, thank you very much.
Sorry, I have to troll a little bit, but also, I think Rebirth actually has a pretty cool ending, and I think if they're doing what they're doing with it, that's a pretty awesome way to do
Mm-hmm.
it. But
Sure,
I don't want
it's
to just have a very abrupt ending, so sort of do closing thoughts and such before we wrap up, because I don't want to be like, okay,
Mhm.
you did your list, we're done. No, like
No,
let's
go away, go
ease
home. Yeah,
let's ease out of the conversation with some closing
sure,
thoughts.
sure.
So you've got a lot of stuff there, and again, my marketing brain, I think the reason why Final Fantasy XIV was able to get rebooted was because it was a live service game and because it was a mainline game. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think if it wasn't a mainline game, they would have just trashed it like so many other Final Fantasy games. But because it was supposed to like carry that legacy of the mainline title, they couldn't just
Mm-hmm.
do nothing with it, especially since it was live service. Like if it was like a standalone game that just didn't sell well, they'd be like, okay, well, whatever, that one just bombed, whatever. But I think they sort of
Mm-hmm.
had to try to salvage it. And so that is my one thing when looking at this. Like, so Rapture bombs really hard, and then they make a sequel, and I look at Eternals and how the sequel for that got cut, and that movie didn't even do that poorly. So I don't know in this
Mm-hmm.
timeline if I am accepting of the premise that somehow Rapture got sequels, but maybe it's just someone who just like a really eccentric billionaire is like, nope, I'm just going to keep throwing my money at it. The one dude who did the Batman movie and Wild Wild West and really wanted that mechanical spider. Maybe he just really wants the mechanical spider in all these movies, and that's how they all get made. Just like the one stipulation: mechanical spider in every single movie. In which case, like, hey, more power to you.
Well, the way I was approaching that was like the first Rapture bombs, right? But Final Fantasy at this point is enough of a has first of all the cultural zeitgeist is going to be vastly different than what it is in the real world. But if just for the sake of relatability, I kept like the technological aspects of it and comparisons of it simpatico. But let's say for instance Rapture bombs, but there is enough interest on the creative team to where Yoshi P decides to pick it up and go, I think I can do a better job of telling the story than whoever did it before. I forgot who I have in my spreadsheet, but I can do a better job with this. Give me a shot. Let's make this movie. Let's have it just basically be like a rehash, not a rehash, but like you know what Realm Reborn is. So basically, because Final Fantasy has enough fan following, if it's not widely financially successful, it's at least got a very dedicated fan base to where there would be enough interest, enough capital for a new director, a new creative team to carry on with what Rapture failed to do. And it got so successful that there's a bunch of sequels and special presentations and TV shows. That's the way I was approaching it.
I mean, I could definitely, I definitely see that. I think it's just that's the
I
one
can't hear you.
part that was difficult for me.
I can't hear you, Greg.
Oh, how about now?
I can hear you now.
Cool. I was saying no. That was like the only thing that I had difficulty with on that, and also just wrapping my mind around
Mm-hmm.
like this, alternate utopia where Alexander Hamilton, doesn't get die. We get rid of slavery by like the fourth administration in the United States. Like, we all have UBI, everything's great. So like it's a vastly different world, and in this world, Final Fantasy is accepted by the masses. So definitely a different timeline.
It's a timeline I wanted to see. I don't know what else to tell you. Real life stipulations be darned.
Right. No, I mean I hear it. And I think it's a very interesting creative exercise the way you see like how two different fans of the series approach it in drastically different ways. And I think that also
Mm-hmm.
leads to something about like the way that the series is so different when you have different creative leads at the head of each game where some games you'll have a guy like me who I'm trying to think of where I would land like maybe like a Hiroyuki Ito. I'm just like look, I'm going to get it done. I'm going to smoke a bunch of cigarettes in the process because I'm stressed, but I will get it done. And I think, actually, if you look at the two of us as like who would be like the more like professional business minded one, who would be the more Nomura esque artist, you would think the dude with long hair and the pink flamboyant shirt would be like the Nomura guy, but I think you've got a little bit more of the Nomura free flowing, like let's get big, grand, ambitious, go with it mind, and that's how you get some of the best stuff. And so it definitely was interesting to see the different approaches we took to this same project.
Hmm. No, definitely, definitely. I would love. I would. I mean, not in this video, obviously, but I would have loved to hear you elucidate more on your uh, Final Fantasy cinematic universe. If someday you ever come up with some outlines of how they tie together or how they become abridged, I would love to hear them. I'd love to read them. I'd love to talk about them.
Yeah,
But I know you don't have a lot of time. But like,
yeah,
I
it's
feel like
been
I
it's been a
take up most of the time.
crazy month between like uh job movement and like getting a new cat and just all kinds of like crazy stuff. All the streams I had, it's been just a ton of stuff basically happened all at once this month. Um, so it's been pretty wild. Like today, I had multiple work meetings, interview for a side job. So like it's just like I said, been a crazy month. But as far as looking at my list, as far as like anything specific to mention that I'm looking at, let's see. Trying to think of like what would be the most interesting thing. All right, so for phase two, for like Crisis of the Heart, because I'd have like Crisis Core 10 to 6, and I would have like a lot of the themes of those games being like heart themed, in terms of like what it means, like the deepest corners of the heart. So like really exploring like Terra's relationship with love, 10 to the pining loss for like Titus, and so like that would be like the most Kingdom Heartsy era. And I know that there's a part of me that loves trolling six fans by making it more like Kingdom Hearts. Like that just sounds awesome to me. Uh, but I think like with those ones in particular, like Advent Children 9, 6, Crisis Core, and 10 2, I think I could see all of those like helping build into like a Kingdom Hearts 2 type situation. Like really exploring like, different affairs of the heart. Um, and a phase one I feel like is pretty obvious of just like mainly adapting them and just stretching out 7 into 3 films. And Fabula Nova Crystallis, just like all these like lores dealing with crystals and stuff. I think I would make 16 and 14 tie into the Fabula Nova lore. So there would be like Lassie and Falsey, which honestly for 16 is not hard to do. Like you could very
No, not
easily
at all.
like move some stuff around, and like especially with even like brands and stuff, like it is not hard to to really make that fit into Fabula Nova. Um and then like the Crystal Saga, that'd be like sort of like a easy reboot of just like adapting those into like standalone movies for the most part. Um yeah, so I could do like full on specifics and really dive into like doing plot synopses of each. But since I am actively putting behind my own novel that I'm wanting to work on, and also I've like earlier, I think it was earlier this year, maybe it was last year, I don't remember. Like I already did like a screenplay adaptation of like a
Okay.
novel. So I'm already in like the adaptation zone. It is hard for me to do work on a Final Fantasy series adaptation if it's not something I think I'm actually going to sell. So it's like,
I
ah
get it.
man.
I get it.
So, but I mean, it is definitely fun to think about. Like if if I didn't have to work two jobs, maybe I would do the full on outline for the things. But I think I'd be more interested in doing a like remix of the entire series, like everything is a Lego piece, and then making like a new Final Fantasy from like the ground up. So like you can't have any two characters from the same game. And so it's like, okay, what is a new cast you gather? Um, And then maybe one of the rules is like, it has to be a character who is never a main character. So make them a main, pick out a villain. Like that would be a exercise I would more want to do. It also that would only be one game as opposed to like a 20-year franchise with all the specific notes.
Understood. Gotcha.
But if you had a specific question about anything, feel free to ask. Like if there's anything that's like, I don't quite understand that, or I want a little bit more elaboration on that part.
Yeah, maybe if I have any, I'll reach out to you and let you know.
All right. Well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time to do this stream. It was a lot of fun. I hope you folks at home enjoyed it. It was a good time. And once again, plug your stuff. Tell people where to find you. It's in the description, but tell people what they should be searching for.
Sure. So the name of the band is The Missing Worker. You can find our stuff on Spotify and on Bandcamp, and we have a few videos and snippets of songs and performances, and we have our first two albums available in its entirety to just listen on YouTube if you'd like. That's spelled exactly how I said, The Missing Worker. And yeah, check us out. And if it's your thing, cool. If not, also cool. But yeah, I'm not great with promotions. I just play the bass and sing backup sometimes, but doing my best here. So
Hey
thank you for your
man,
patience.
promo's tough. I understand. But hey man, thank you so much. Gonna end the stream, and thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to check out The Missing Worker. Bye everyone. All right, and the stream has concluded.